Why don't we get started? Welcome all to the January board meeting. I'd like you to join me in the pledge of the flag.
Oh, I think,
You want to do roll first, Michelle?
yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead.
Director McLaughlin,
Here.
Director Bernstein,
Present.
Director Crawley. Oh, you're on mute.
Present.
Thank you. Director Jones
Here.
and Director Solano.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, now please join me in the pledge of the flag. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
to
to the flag
of the
of the
United
United
States
States of America
and to the
and
republic
to the
and to the republic
for which it
which
stands,
it stands,
one nation,
one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and
liberty,
justice
justice for all.
for all.
All right. Well, our first item of business is public comment one. Michelle, do we have any?
No, we do not.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, our first item is the chief's report for January 2021.
So directors, you have my report in your packet. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Chief, you don't want to go through them?
Well, I can. I mean, with time, I didn't know if you want me to go through them or just, I could go through them if you want. It's up to you.
All right. You know, I know I have a number of questions. I suppose we may have questions on most of the items.
Sure. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
All right. I'll allow my fellow board members to go first if anyone has questions.
Jim, I have one.
Go ahead.
Chief, I wasn't clear from the language you used about the departures, where I'm not sure where it was right now. I didn't have enough questions to send them to you in advance, but you were talking about the deputy. Did the deputy retire?
Yeah, Jim Stevens is retired.
Not deputy, not Jim. I'm talking about Mike.
No, Mike Schaefer's still here. So Mike Schaefer and Jim did an overlap, and then Jim, as planned and expected, has retired at the end of the year. So Jim has retired, Captain Troy Holtz retired, and firefighter engineer Matt Pruitt has retired.
But what it said was, I see it now, it's in the fifth paragraph of the first group of things, the fifth paragraph. It says Deputy Chief Schaefer has fully transitioned out with Chief Stevens. So I thought that meant he left the
Yeah,
district.
probably not the best language. Yeah. So what I meant by that was they transitioned and then Jim left because that was the plan. Actually, Jim stayed a little bit longer than the plan to help us out because of the vacancy in HR and so forth. But yeah. Jim,
Okay, thank you.
Schaefer's still here and Jim Stevens is retired.
I'm glad he's still here. I was a little concerned when I thought he had left also.
I'd be more concerned that you would be, believe me.
Okay, thank you.
I'll jump in here. I have a few questions.
Sure.
Chief, there's some reference to using some of our paramedics as part of the vaccination program. Do you have anything more for us than what we read here?
Yeah, countywide, there's an effort afoot to use both firefighter, paramedics, and EMTs, not just the firefighters, but the EMTs as well. And that's in every fire department to see who those would be that would be willing. I know we have a number that are to be able to use them for mass vaccination. How that would work, I don't know yet. But, you know, we're suffering through, you know, a loss, and not as bad, obviously, Southern California or the Valley, especially Southern Valley in California, but, you know, of healthcare workers being at a premium and not available for a, you know, variety of reasons, right? They're overworked, too many patients, too many places they could work or need to work. And so this was a move by the county in conjunction with the county fire chiefs to add more potential individuals out there to give vaccinations if and when that happens, which is a moving target daily. So
Would that be a Cal OES activation? Would we be
no,
reimbursed?
that's a little bit different. So the Cal OES activation, we didn't want to go in the first round, and that's countywide too, until everybody got their second vaccine, which is happening this week. So once they get their second vaccination, then there's, I think, a little bit of room to, just like we do for fire line paramedic for a wildland fire, to have them respond out of county if that's something we're going to do as county fire agencies.
Okay. We have, you have items referring to the town of Atherton, East Palo Alto, Menlo Park about meetings. And I thought that was something that we should probably discuss. And
there's a desire there. So I could tell you in the town of Atherton, the manager contacted me, and I understand from the mayor, Elizabeth, that they would like to have some dialogue about a meeting. George wasn't specific, and I didn't follow up other than say I would bring it up to you as board members. There really wasn't a time for that. I know tonight you're going to pick your liaisons, or you pick them and it's coming out, you just got to ratify it. The same with Menlo Park. And, for everybody in discussions with Director McLaughlin and Bernstein at our meeting, they had suggested a January 28th meeting. We thought that was too soon. It probably was going to be too soon for them as well. I know Director Bernstein has reached out to Drew Combs. And at this point, both of those entities or both of those jurisdictions are wanting to have some form of a meetup with the board and I guess the staff, so myself and whoever, depending upon what the topics are. But, as you ratify your liaisons, and that's probably a good task for those individuals to follow up and figure out when that works and what you want to talk about.
okay, I would agree. I would propose, presuming the board endorses the committee assignments, liaison assignments. I would ask that those liaisons, contact their respective jurisdictions and enter that discussion. Put together a solid agenda and let's get some meeting dates on the calendar. Virginia?
And Jim, on that too, I listed for Menlo Park what the manager and I talked about. So everybody has that. And again, that's not to limit or to say that's the agenda. That was a starting point, or actually an end point to where we left our conversation off last time.
Okay, Virginia, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on the liaison situation, because I know that I didn't want to jump the gun until we ratified the liaison. So I'll contact Mayor Elizabeth Lewis of Atherton if we approve the liaisons. But I wanted to just go into the City of East Palo Alto thing if you're done, Jim. It's just a quick clarification in the chief's report.
No, go ahead, Virginia. I had a couple more, but go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to let y'all know that I was the liaison to East Palo Alto when I think this event happened on Christmas Eve, or this incident, and that the water supply issue that Harold is referring to in his chief's report really had to deal with water pressure issue, which would be a water supply issue. I just wanted everyone to know that specifically that's what Mayor Carlos Romero reached out to me about, to see if our firefighters had any issues with the water pressure issue for that structure fire.
All right.
And it sounds like there were none, right, Harold?
Yeah, this time. I mean,
Yeah, this time.
That's a relevant issue though, just so we're all clear. That's not, it was a fair question because, that's East Palo Alto struggles with an older infrastructure and, problems. And so it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that we could, but fortunately, it was a small enough fire during the day. So that was good. They keep their pressures up during the day, I think more so than at night. And the bigger issue for that fire was displacement of 11 people on Christmas Eve, which was sad in a lot of ways,
But the main reason that I wanted to bring that up, Harold, is that I know that the city's probably paying attention to the water pressure issue with the understanding that their infrastructure is pretty old. So we should just kind of keep on top of that too, so that we're, working with them to give them information.
Yeah, John's on top of that. The Fire Prevention Bureau is on top of that constantly. I mean, that's It's not that we shouldn't be involved, but I mean, it's a huge issue that needs to get resolved at some point, especially if they want to continue to develop certain portions of the town. It's just, they got a lot of problems under the ground. That's one of them. Sewer's another one, which is actually maybe a bigger problem from what I hear, depending upon, what elements of that relate to certain parts again of the city.
Thank you.
Jim?
Rob?
Yeah, to follow up with that, Chief, I know the San Bruno incident had the loss of water pressure also, where they couldn't fight that fire. Do we have the inventory of what CAL FIRE provided with those extension trailers that had extra hose that they could run the hose for a distance? Do we have that capability?
Sure, we can always call for that under auto aid because CAL FIRE is, San Mateo County Fire. But within the county, we do have, water tankers, tenders, which would probably be a better way to go because the mobility of the water supply versus trying to lay hose line. And in that one, and just so you know too, we have our own stockpile of LDH or large diameter hose in row packs. So we do have some of our own capability if we had to go around certain water main supplies. But for East Palo Alto, and what these guys know here, they can call for water tender 7, and we've done that before out of Woodside to get us, thousands of gallons of water, which should be adequate to suppress any single family dwelling in East Palo Alto. It's not what you want to do, but if you have to, then, that's always an option. Better than hose, right? Bring the water right to the engine.
No. Thank you, Chief.
Could I ask a follow-up just for what Rob said? Chief, are all the hose connections in San Mateo County compatible?
Yeah. That was, it's a good question. It was only Oakland that had problems years ago. And there were special adapters during the Oakland Hills fire that were in a warehouse somewhere. So yeah, we all use the same type of hose and fittings, and all of it is interchangeable.
Thank you.
In continuing, the Zone Haven item, I believe that's the mapping system that we saw the demo for at the last meeting.
Correct. Yeah. And so we did hear back.
If I could just ask a question, I see that we have, you say you've engaged, the 3 municipal public safety police partners. And I was wondering, where's the county on this project? Are they involved, with the comm center and the EOC?
They're the lead, actually. And they actually have been the most responsive on wanting to set up both the collaborative training or cooperative training, as well as some form of an MOU, which would contain, what we expect out of each other, very much like the Walsh Road siren, right? So what are the protocols for that to occur, which actually I think would be a good thing for them to help us, on that, because then maybe East Palo Alto, Menlo Park, and Atherton would just adopt the same thing. John's working on that, but the county reached out, credit to Sheriff Bolanos. He reached out right away when I wrote the email. The others have not, but they may just be waiting for him to take the lead on it, since the county is kind of the big partner in this whole thing. We want to know obviously law's got the lead, right? Their evacuation and shelter. So, but it needs to be a collaborative process, because fire is the one that would initiate probably some form of evacuation for at least a fire.
All right, thank you.
Can I piggyback on that one also, please, Jim?
Yeah, please, Chuck.
Chief, when we had the presentation before, and I know this sounds minor, but if somebody wanted to Google it, there might be some confusion. When we discussed it before, Zone Haven was written as one word, just with a capital Z. Here it's written as 2 words. Do you know what the actual name of it is?
Yeah, no, I put it 2 words because I thought that's it. But if it's just 1, that could be my mistake.
I don't know. That's why I was trying to find out.
I'll find out.
All right. My next item is Fire Station 1. I see reference to restarting the training tower and classroom expansion development team. Is that something that's Could you give us a little history on that, Harold? You know,
Yeah, so we had that in place prior to going with Station 4. And as you know, it was in the space needs as well. So we kind of suspended it at the time that we started just focusing on the other projects to make sure that they took all, they took a lot of time and energy. And, we were somewhat unsettled in training because Mike had moved over or was moving over to Deputy Chief. Todd, who's now the division chief in training, wasn't permanent. It was a staff captain before this. So, out of I guess an expediency of time and positions and just priority, we're going to bring those guys back together and hopefully have a proposal for you that's in line with what was going on with space needs to at least address the training tower and the need for that, because I know there's still a question of whether or not there's even a need. But then, what would that project look like that includes, some form of a classroom as well. So I don't see us changing the locations of things because that's already kind of been discussed and looked at. But I do see us, looking at what would the cost be. And then, obviously, from what I heard from the board, there's still some concern whether we do this at all or we do it here and why would we do it. So, I've told them that the group, we need to be able to validate all those different things and have explanations on why and what and how long and, what's the priority. But that is a big deal for us because training, especially with 9 more people coming and almost over half the department that got here in the last 5 years. I mean, that facility gets used regularly and it's substandard when it comes to training. We will have, here's the good news, our last cell site will be gone here. I was hoping by March, but maybe a little bit longer. But that has also impeded some of our ability to use the tower in the past. And the tower's an inadequate facility, but the goal would be to replace it and move on to something else. You don't have to do the station right away, but certainly that was kind of the bigger part, which is training as a constant.
Is this strictly an internal effort? Will it involve any consultants or design people?
No, not at this point. I think what we got to do is just answer some of the questions that the board has had regarding, do you go with the regional training center or do you go to this one? And if so, how big, how much? And then I think if the board agrees, so we got some work to do is the bottom line. If the board agrees, then we can move on to that next step. You know what I mean? Which is you can engage someone to go out and design and do all those different things that you need to do. No different than we did with the fire station, Station 4.
Jim?
Rob?
Yeah, I don't know if it's appropriate off the chief's report to make some type of a motion involving this project. Would that be all right, Stephen?
So it would, generally speaking, not be appropriate to have a discussion and certainly not a vote of items that are unagendized but just included on the chief's report. The purpose of the chief's report and the discussion is to sort of ask clarifying questions, but not to engage in detailed discussions on items that have not been agendized.
All right.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, there's a difference between things that are agendized on the agenda and things that are in the packet and the report that is part of the packet. And the key is to look at what's on the agenda in terms of notifying the public what you will be discussing, not to look into the packet itself.
Thank you, Stephen. The point of clarification that I wanted to make was basically not to go forward with any district funds, either the planning, design, or the constructed training tower, classroom expansion, or other capital facility improvements, unless it comes directly to the board first. And I don't know if that's a motion or if that's a concern that I have as one of the board members. That's my concern with spending that much funding for that type of a facility.
So just to hopefully alleviate your concerns, that would not be what we would do. And certainly the process is to come to the board before any of that happens.
right, so Chief, and again, just for my benefit, so this development team is strictly internal.
Correct. Yeah.
Discuss maybe do a internal needs assessment, put together well, you said they will be looking at the whole issue of the training tower. What are the alternatives? Are there other sites available? Are there other facilities available that we could use?
Correct.
All right.
Yeah, all that. So, I know that every station, before we build it and before we spend any money on architects or anybody else, we always go through this process first as well.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Jim.
Okay. I had a couple other items, but I'd like to open it up to the other members. Virginia?
Yeah, Harold, regarding Station 4, I think people are very excited that things are moving along, but I did get some feedback about the noise from neighbors in that area.
Yeah, it's going to be hard because they're doing the demo of the concrete. I mean, when you're breaking cement, there's no way to make it sound, I was out there today, I drove by it. Anytime you're using basically an excavator with a breaker on it, it's loud. I wish I could say it's not going to be, but you might let them know once the concrete's broken and out, then it will get quieter. It won't, there's always work that needs to get done. And at certain points it will get noisy. That's probably this will probably be the noisiest phase, is to rip out the concrete.
Okay, so is there they're asking if there's a timeline for the construction, and also since I think a lot of the concrete demo was happening before 8 a.m. if construction can wait until at least, or the construction in general could wait until 8 a.m. before jackhammering, because they're thinking that this is in a residential neighborhood. I get it. So I just wanted to relay the message from.
I hadn't heard that. So they're saying they're starting before 8 o'clock, because I believe that.
Yeah. And I got this message at, about probably 5 minutes before 8.
Okay.
So I'm just letting you know, this is the feedback that I'm getting. And then also they were just wondering if there's any way to understand or get access to the construction timeline.
So all that was given to you guys as board members, I believe, in November. So you have the whole thing. Either you can reference it or we can go back and look at it again.
Well, yeah. So that would be in a report. But is there any? Okay, I'll let them know.
Off the top of my head, I don't. We're ahead of schedule, which is good.
Yeah.
So, I'm happy about that. The fencing, the demo, the removal of the debris, and of course today, the concrete. I was not aware they started before 8. I'll let John remind the general that that's not allowed, and people are going to get mad if they do it. So I think, I don't think it's 7. I'm pretty sure it's 8 o'clock.
Yeah. Well, so I got this from this person before 8. And then also regarding public input in terms of the design, is that done?
It's all done.
That's what I thought, because this person wanted to find out if, if she could talk to you, and this is a different person, about the color of the station's doors being black instead of red. So I don't know.
Actually, they're red, and that's what's approved in the whole project that went through the county and was public notice and everything. So
yeah, okay.
But I'm guessing.
Should I have her reach out to you about that?
I'm happy to talk to anybody.
Okay.
At the end of the day, why don't we wait and see what it looks like when it's done? It could be extremely attractive. I know those renderings, I think they look good, and they're in line with other facilities that have red doors. And
well, they just really liked Station 6 in downtown, so they thought that was really cute, and they liked the color scheme and everything. So
that's
I just wanted to give you that input from them.
I mean, there's pros and cons to all of that. You know what I mean? The con on the all clear doors is that they have to take their fire equipment on and off. Everybody gets to watch. So
right.
I mean, I think it's a little bit. I hadn't thought of that either. I've never had that scenario, but that's the downside, right, on those things.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to give you the feedback that I've gotten from some of the neighbors. I mean, I live a quarter of a mile from that station, so
Well, I can
I
help
thought
you
you'd,
solve the noise problem if in fact
yeah,
it's running too early. The doors and everything's all approved. And I think we just gotta be careful not trying to micromanage what was done already.
I know. I know. I'm just giving you the feedback, Harold.
All right.
Thank you.
The cake is baked.
Yes.
That's a good way to put it.
So, Chuck, Robert, do you have any questions?
I
have
already
no
asked mine,
questions.
thank you.
I had a question about the reference to the emergency preparedness RFP.
Yes,
It says the first draft will be sent to the EPREP committee at the February meeting.
that's the goal. Yeah.
Do you have a sense of it says first draft, but will it require much?
Well, I didn't want to say finished or, I mean, I actually draft. I mean, at this point, I know there's a lot of interest from the fire board. So again, me and the semantics in which I tried to portray, we don't propose that it's a done deal. And we know the board's got a lot of concern about what, is in that RFP and how it would work and so forth. So I don't want to just suppose that whatever we put together, I mean, we have Palo Alto's, what they did. Ours might want to be different than that for different reasons. A, we're not a city, but B, I think the district does have some different concerns and issues. So, again, my intent there was to say that it's not a done deal, just going to the EPREP committee and that you guys wouldn't have additional opportunities to make changes, adds, deletes, whatever it's going to be. So.
All right. I had just
You know,
one more.
I did have one comment. Could I?
Go ahead, Chuck. Go ahead.
And I'm mindful of Stephen's kind of caution about what we can or cannot discuss. But one of the problems is if I feel sometimes if I don't speak up, things move forward. For example, the chief, you just made reference to the fact that we kind of, even though we never voted on it, we never really even discussed it. I did not buy off on the space recommendations that came from the consultants. So the fact that they've made some assumptions that I don't make, the fact that we voted to approve some COVID-19 modifications for the administration building in no way has me convinced that we should keep the administration building. So I just, again, it's never been discussed, and I just hesitate to stay silent because I feel like sometimes the silence is somehow assent, and I'm not in agreement with that. I think we should get rid of the administration building and consolidate. And I think we need, rather than do these one-off projects, I think we need to do some space planning. Unfortunately, what the consultants did was conceptualize those things that were already on the table, or visualize those things that were already on the table, but they never talked outside the box or looked outside the box. They never talked about the problems we would have with the warehouse and what alternatives there were. They never looked at alternatives for Station 77 and so forth. And I feel like we really didn't do the space needs study that I feel we need to do, which is something that we should be looking in the future, the next 20 or 30 or 40 years. So I'm hearing your report, and I just want to register the fact that I think we need to do a better space needs study and look at alternatives and truly get a plan that would head us in a direction for the next 20 to 30 to 40 years.
I have just one last item. It's the item on the board goals. I feel like we still have to make just one final push to really get that done. And Robert, I'd ask you for your input on this. I think, at the end of the year, we'd pretty much adopted, the board priorities, but we had talked about getting together in a workshop or some other fashion to review what the current areas are and just discuss, do they still reflect the board's direction? Is there a need to revise them? So, Robert, do you have any thoughts on where we left that process at the end of the year?
Well, yes, I think that what you see before you are, the board accomplishments, and I think the piece is missing from completing this. There was two areas we was looking into. One was the timeline in terms of actually sequentially, the priorities in a timeline fashion, and so that we'll know once something is near completion or is completed, that it moves into a waterfall into the next area. So I think that's really important. We did talk about, as you mentioned, Jim, that we looked at December, which we didn't quite get to, but early January, we would look at the goals again to make sure that, and affirm that, yes, this is what the board is looking to try to, for this year, to try to accomplish and complete, and set about trying to make that happen. So I think it's still apropos to me that we look at a time frame. January is almost gone, but at least fairly soon, to try to sit down and to go through that, plus affirm that these are the things that the board wants to try to accomplish this year, as well as to try to set everything else into a time frame, a 3-year, 5-year time frame to try to accomplish things.
Yeah, that you captured my recollection as well. And express it well. Just where I thought we left it as well. So I think we do have a need for a workshop, several hours. I think this is important enough that we should dedicate some time to it. So unless I hear any objection, I'll ask Michelle to send out some proposed dates. Is there? I would envision, and Robert, do you think 2 or 3 hours? Do you think that's sufficient to?
Yeah, I think that's a good time frame, especially if we want to try to spend some time. I mean, we spend some time this year looking at each goal, but I think no less than 2 hours, I think. Yeah.
Chuck, I don't know if you have a preference as far as the day, if a Saturday is better than a weekday for you, or do you have a preference?
Well, I think a Saturday I would be preferred, but I have a flexible enough schedule that I could make it work during the week also.
Okay, I'll ask Michelle to get some propose some dates, and we'll get Belinda, include her in this effort, and I think we're on the 10-yard line with this one. I think just a little more effort, and we'll get it to where it needs to be. So
I concur.
Right.
Jim, I got a couple more things if you want to.
Please. Yeah, please.
Yeah,
do.
so I wanted you to know, for Director Crawley's question, I got staff listening on the line, so they're texting me with answers. Your construction timeline for the county is 7 a.m. So sorry that it's before 8, but that's the rules. They'll start at 7 a.m. and no sooner. On Zone Haven, for Director Bernstein, it's one word, Zone Haven. So I had it wrong.
Thank you.
And the last thing, if we're at the end of questions on this, we got our brand new HR manager is ready to introduce herself tonight. If we can get her click in, Francine Hunt. So you tell me when you're ready for her to be introduced, if there's no more questions on the chief's report.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, perhaps you could do the introduction.
Yeah, well, so I'll start, and then maybe Michelle, I don't know if Francine can get herself on without you helping, but hopefully she can. And
hi.
there she is. So, we did a search for an HR manager, and Francine's here. We got to meet her first day today. Well, I met her before, but the staff got to meet her today, as best you can have COVID meetings these days, but she was on site, so I appreciated that. And I'll let her have you learn a little bit about her, and she can introduce herself and give her background better than I can do it. So Francine, you can take it from there. But I'll just say this, we're very excited about having her here. And I think it's going to be a great asset to the team. So.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening, board. My name is Francine Hunt, and today was my first day with Menlo Park Fire Protection District as the Human Resources Manager. I come to the district with approximately just almost 20 years of experience working at public sector human resources departments. I have experience working in all facets of human resources, from recruitment, benefits, labor, policy, employee development, training. And I'm very excited to be here. I was worked at some of the agencies I've worked at. I worked at some larger agencies like the City of Santa Clara. We had almost 2,000 employees when you include all of our as-needed staff. I worked there for almost 17 years. I started as a human resources technician, was promoted up to human resources supervisor, and then finally to human resources division manager. And I've also worked for Sunnyvale and most recently Milpitas. So I'm very excited to join the district. I was able to meet a lot of different divisions, chiefs and battalion chiefs, and visit the Fire Station 1. And I look forward to meeting you as well in person. Thank you for having me.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
I think I speak for the entire board, please welcome, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much for taking the time to introduce yourself. All right, looks like our next item is the report from the PUN group. So, Chief, I don't know if you were going to set that up or Kathleen.
So I'll leave it to Kathleen to do that, and she can do the introduction and so forth.
Okay.
Director McLaughlin, if you're welcome to skip over me if you like. I have no real pride on this, but there is an item on the agenda of my report, and I'm prepared to give one if you like.
I had no intent to do so. My inexperience has just revealed itself for the first time tonight. So please, you're on the schedule now. So please.
Sure, not a problem. And I'll be brief and start by offering my welcome and to Ms. Hunt. Looking forward to working together with you too. So the agenda title on my report tonight is the Brown Act Meetings in a Pandemic Public Participation. And I put this on the agenda because I wanted to clear up in case there had been any confusion in the past regarding the rules for public participation in meetings and how those rules may have been impacted or may be impacted by conducting virtual meetings during this time of a pandemic. We may be meeting virtually for a little while longer still, so I thought I would just make sure that we're all starting the new year clear on how the rules operate. The Brown Act describes two aspects to the public's place on a meeting agenda. So first, each regular meeting agenda, like this one, must allow members of the public to speak on any item of interest within the district subject matter jurisdiction that is not listed on the agenda. There need be only one such opportunity to speak, but the district agendas include two by district policy. That policy is not necessary, but there's no harm in having additional public comment periods. Special meetings need not include the opportunity to speak on items that are not on the agenda. That is a feature only of regular meetings like this evening. In addition to items that are not on the agenda, the public must be allowed to speak on any item of business that is on the agenda, and they must be allowed to do so either before or during the board's consideration of the item. So that means any time prior to a vote, if there's a vote. If there's not a vote, then just before the end of your discussion of the item, And if it's a closed session, before you go into closed session, there needs to be an opportunity for public comment on the item that is the topic of the closed session. The board is allowed to adopt reasonable regulations, in particular time limits for public comment for speakers, but those regulations have to be reasonable and fair and enforced uniformly. And that's an issue, especially when there's an item that has a lot of public interest, and it's important accordingly to, and good practice to implement these reasonable rules all the time and not just when there's a controversial item that may be before the board. So in the pandemic, the governor has issued a series of executive orders modifying the Brown Act that, for instance, makes it possible for us to be holding this meeting virtually via Zoom, which otherwise would be a problem under the Brown Act unless you each wanted to make your location public to anyone who wanted to join you at your location. But these executive orders do require that the agenda describe the means by which any member of the public may observe the meeting and may make public comment in accordance with the Brown Act. And the executive orders, further direct that the board must use, quote, sound discretion and make all reasonable efforts to adhere to the Brown Act as closely as possible, in particular to maximize the provision of public access and public comment. So I think the district has been doing a great job both following the letter of the Brown Act as well as the governor's executive orders. I hope you'll agree. Occasionally, I've piped up to remind us all to make an extra effort to allow for public comment on items that are on the agenda before there's a vote. And that's just in a sort of a matter of prudence and an abundance of caution to make sure that there's no member of the public who may not know how to raise their hand on Zoom or unmute themselves in the Zoom call or didn't know that they were supposed to send an email to the clerk. It's just a good idea just to pause and make sure that the public has had a chance to comment and that the record reflects that before there is a vote. So that's my 3 minutes, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have relating to public participation in Brown Act meetings.
Thank you for that, Stephen.
Sure.
Chuck?
Stephen, I wondered if you could address the issue of when a regular meeting becomes a special meeting. And I ask this because at some point I was told it didn't seem reasonable, particularly since there are different rules for public comment, that if we changed the date of a regular meeting, then it became a special meeting. I was under the impression a special meeting was one of those things that had a very narrow focus and had different notification time limits and so forth. But since in effect you disenfranchise the public from a special meeting, it seems like if you were to change your regular meeting dates from Thursdays to Wednesdays, the regular meetings would become special meetings, and nobody could ever participate.
Good question, and it's a good example of how the Brown Act and frankly any law has both the spirit of the law and the letter of the law, and one gets into trouble when one tries to create loopholes that are not consistent with the spirit of the law, even though they might be consistent with the letter of the law. So the district by statute adopts a schedule for its regular meetings on this third Tuesday of every month. That's when regular meetings are. If for some reason it changes that schedule, it becomes, as you said, a special meeting because it is not at the time that this board has set is the time for its regular meetings. The board could, by motion, say, we're in advance, next month's regular meeting, we're changing the schedule so that regular meeting is happening on a Thursday, but it's more often the case that something comes up closer to the time of the meeting that makes it necessary to change it, and then it becomes a special meeting. Whether a meeting is regular or special has nothing to do with how special the subject matter and the items on the agenda are. It only has to do with whether the meeting is in that Tuesday night time that the board has decided is when their their regular meetings are. I agree with you that it would be a bad idea to adopt a motion that says our regular meetings are on Tuesday, and then every month change your regular meetings to be special meetings on Thursdays, and specifically not allow the public to comment on items that were not on the agenda because technically it's a special meeting. That sounds like a pretty shady maneuver if the purpose is to deny the public an opportunity to participate. And I certainly wouldn't suggest, I don't think any of us would ever want to do that, but it is something that, you know, clever people can read the law to allow various things. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
I have a question,
Robert?
Jim. So Steve, if I understand this, if the board decides, say for example, in February, the third Tuesday the month, third in February, if for whatever reason the board cannot make, the majority of the board cannot make the meeting or got a conflict and it's known in January, and the board at that point could say that take a vote and say we're going to have our regular meeting on Thursday, for example, that would still be a regular board meeting at that point, or would it not?
If the board in January said we're going to change our schedule of regular meetings so that the February meeting happens on the fourth Thursday, that then fourth Thursday becomes a regular meeting.
Oh, okay.
If the board doesn't do that, but meets anyway on the fourth Thursday out of necessity, that would be a special meeting. But my common sense recommendation would be that you would treat it like a regular meeting and not use that as an opportunity to take advantage of some different rules that would apply to special meetings. There would be no purpose served in that.
Okay, thank you.
But technically, that would be a special meeting.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Stephen.
Sure.
And that brings us to the pun report. So, Chief, did you want to set this up, or is Kathleen going to?
I think I'm going to be setting this up.
Okay.
So today we have with us Frances Cow. I'm not really sure if that's the proper way to say her last name, Frances, but she is a partner with the Poon Group. We also have Ken Poon with us tonight to do the presentation, and I'll let them take it from here.
Great, thank you so much. And let me share my screen real quick. Good evening, President, Vice President, and directors here. I'm Ken Poon. I'm the managing partner of the firm. Very nice to see you all again, even though this year we cannot meet like personally, but at the end of the day, do it virtually. It's also great to see you all. Along with me tonight is Frances Kuo, who is the engagement partner of the engagement, and will answer any questions that you may have regarding the audit. As usual, every single year after we finish up the audit, we communicate to you regarding the audit results, and then also bring you up to speed on any issues that may have during the audit. And then we'll go through some of the required communications under the auditing standard. So presenting to you tonight, it's in the PowerPoint presentation. I'm hoping that you can see my screen right now. If you don't see it, please let me know.
Copy of it is in the packet, just so you know.
Great, thank you, Kathleen. So a couple of things in my presentation. We'll go through the scope of work that we performed, the required communications under the current auditing standard AUC sections 260, communication with those charged with governance, and under the definition, those charged with governance, basically in the government standard audit, it's including management and the board of directors. So after that, we'll talk about the financial statement, and then we'll pull out the key pension and Opeb information. Last but not least is to deliver our audit results to you, and we'll answer any questions that you may have. the scope of work, including in the package, is the audit of the comprehensive annual financial report. This report is prepared under the GFOA guideline. Basically, it's above and beyond the minimum requirement of the GAAP requirement, the generally accepted accounting principle standard that is required. Since the district has expended more than $750,000 in federal expenditure, we are also required to perform the audit in accordance with government auditing standards. So later on, because we are still continue to perform the single audit piece, that report will present to you when we issue the single audit report. And last but not least is also the communication with those charged with governance. Basically, we also issue a standard separate letter regarding my presentation for tonight. So just kind of briefly go through the our responsibility within the auditing standard. You are engaged us to perform the audit. So the first thing first is to express our opinion on whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement, whether caused by due from fraud or errors. Our responsibility is to plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance, about whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement. We consider internal control over financial reporting, and such internal control consideration is solely for the purpose of determining the audit procedures and not to provide any assurance on the internal control. However, if we identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiency in internal control, we are required to report it to you in writing. A couple of required communications. So we are assisting the district in preparing the financial statements. So independence become a something that we need to further consider. And then under the government auditing standard, there's a series of safeguard, and then also the procedures that we need to perform to make sure that the district has the personnel that has the skill, knowledge, and experience to take the responsibility of the financial statement. After we perform the procedures, evaluating your skill, knowledge, and experience, and then also our safeguard within our firm, we report to you. We, as the firm, comply with all relevant ethical requirements regarding independence. Regarding the significant accounting policy, as you're aware, there's a lot of accounting policy that is available for the district, and the district also disclose all the significant accounting policy in Note 1 to the financial statement, including the reporting entity itself, how you do your disclose the cash and investment, the risk exposure, capital asset depreciation schedule. Those are all included in Note 1 to the financial statement. Because of COVID-19, GASB actually do issue GASB statement number 95 to provide some relief in financial reporting. So basically, there's no new accounting pronouncement that is required to be adopted during the current fiscal year. Some significant accounting estimate are always included in the financial statement. One is the depreciation on capital asset, the net pension liabilities, and then also the net other post-employment benefit liabilities are all significant estimate that we use in these financial statements. Sensitive disclosure, as we said earlier in Note 1 to the financial statement, those disclose the summary of significant accounting policy that is adopted by the district, which is used on these financial statements. Note 8, you have a couple pages long on the pension plan. Note 10 regarding the other post-employment benefit, which is your medical benefit for the retirees. And then Note 13, there are some non-financial disclosure regarding some commitment and contingency that has not been reflected on the face of the financial statement, but is important enough to disclose in these financial statement. So those are the four sensitive disclosure that we would like you to pay a little bit more attention to when you review the financial report. We are happy that we don't have any misstatements, so there's no uncorrected misstatement reported in the in these financial statement. We did not pass on any adjustment that is required to be reported. And then once in a while, that the district may go to another accountant to seek another opinion regarding any unique accounting treatment. During the current year, based on our knowledge, and then also management informed us, there's no such consultation regarding that matters. The last two things is very important, and we encountered no difficulties, not only significant, and we don't have any difficulties in dealing with management. And then also we did not have any disagreement with management in terms of any accounting treatment or any audit procedures that we perform. So the next couple slides is talking about the financial statement overview. So it's getting into the numbers. So at the end of June 30, 2020, the district ended with a total net position of $92.4 million compared to last year, $79.4 million. So basically it's significant increase in your net position, of which $54 million is investment in capital asset. Basically, this is is what we call the non-liquidable asset. It's not easy to change it in cash. $800,000 being restricted, which is restricted by third party, and then remaining an unrestricted net position of $37.5 million. So which is a really, really good result. Looking at the change in net position, and Chief, I'm not going to use the word surplus. There's only a change in net position for the current year. As you can see, there's a $13 million increase in your net position. So total program revenue, basically this is a charges for service or any grant supporting. So total for the year, it's about like $4.3 million. Total expenses for the district, $53 million. That's including all the general fund, all your funds that's included is $53 million. So those, the net between program revenue and the expenses is what we call the net cost of service, is supported by the general revenue. Mainly is your property tax of $60 million, use of money and property, which is your investment earnings, $990,000, and then some miscellaneous revenue of $343,000. So total about like increased by $13 million. Very good results. As you're aware, the pension and Opeb liabilities are purely an estimate on these financial statements. So GASB actually do require a sensitivity disclosure to be reported in the notes to the financial statement, on top of just reporting the on the face of financial statement using the current discount rate. So the district is a it's using a 7.15% of the current discount rate for the miscellaneous plan. The liability reported on the face of the financial statement is $2.5 million, and the safety plan is $36.6 million. So totaling is $39 million. If the discount rate is dropped by 1%, that's mean your expected long-term rate of return did not meet the 7% mark. Your liability can go up by almost like $20.5 million, going up to $59.6 million. But vice versa, if the expected long-term rate of return in like can meet the 8%, your liability can drop it to $22 million. So it is that reflect the sensitivity of just +1 and -1%, but $39 million is already reported in as the liability on the face of a financial statement. Same thing for Opec Liability using a discount rate of 5.47%. The total liability is $3.1 million compared to if the discount rate dropped by 1%, $4.1 million. It's not a big change compared to pension. Vice versa, the discount rate increased by 1%, the liability can drop it to $2.3 million. So last but not least is to deliver our audit results. So we are happy to deliver that we issue an unmodified opinion on the financial statement, which state that the financial statement are fairly presented in all material respect, significant accounting policy have been consistently applied, estimates are reasonable, and the disclosure are properly reflected in these financial statements. Very happy to say that we don't have any internal control issues that deems to be significant deficiency or material weaknesses, so that we have nothing to report on internal control. That's mean you do have a strong internal control that we are able to rely on. So which is really, really good result. So that's conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Chuck?
I had one question. I wonder if you could address the source of the 7.15% discount rate that you're using for the pensions. Where did that come from? I don't believe that's the same rate that CalPERS uses. So I'm just curious about the source.
Let me check.
The 7.15%, it's actually based on the actuarial determined the discount rate from CalPERS. So that percentage actually comes from the CalPERS actuarial report that they actually issue to all the cost sharing plan. And so that's where the 7.15% comes from, which is coming from the CalPERS report.
Oh, okay. Then I may have old information. I thought the CalPERS discount rate was 7.25%.
Right. I think it dropped. It has been dropping every year since a couple of years back, and then they have been adjusting the discount rate these couple of years.
Yeah, I actually thought that the discount rate went down to 7. Did it go up 0.15?
Yeah, the 0.15 is really the administrative expense per.
Okay.
So the discount rate is really the 7%.
Right. That's
0.15 is really it's on the administrative expenses.
okay. So that's the net. That's
Yep.
the net discount rate essentially.
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then also the discount rate, the actuary, no matter it is the CalPERS actuary or your own actuary, they determine the discount rate being used for the current fiscal year. And for CalPERS, they look at the historical 30 years of discount rate. So that's why a lot of people having an argument saying, hey, the CalPERS in the last couple of years never meet the 7%. How could they use the 7%? They are looking at the 30 years long rate of return and determine the 7% is still a good rate to evaluate your total pension liabilities.
Yeah. I mean, over a 20-year period, it's literally dropped from like 7.75% to 8% down to finally 7.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you explain also why the discount rate is different for the pension and the OPEB?
Well, OPEB is much shorter life. So basically, the amount that is being in the irrevocable trust, is shorter than pension. So that's why the change in the discount rate is always looking at the expected long-term rate table that you guys have on an annual basis. So that's why it is like the difference between the pension and OPEB are always different because you don't have a longer history in evaluating the expected long-term rate of return compared to pension is very different. And then also pension, they have a bigger pool to look at, while in your OPEB plan, it's only yourself. So that's why it's a lot smaller scale and you have the district have the decision to make on the investment options.
So is the 5.47%, did the district make that decision, or was that number assigned to us?
Is the actuary determine the discount rate?
Which actuary though?
I believe it's
Bickmore?
Bickmore, right?
Bickmore?
Mhm.
So is this a consultant to us, or
Yes. It's a consultant, yes.
I see.
Right. I have a question. I think this is probably best directed to Kathleen. Before I get to it, though, I want to congratulate Kathleen for another, great result. I think, as I understand, Ken described this. His work depends on what you do, and it's a reflection of the great work you do. So, thank you, and your staff as well. So, thank you for another stellar job. There's reference to the internal controls, and that, as I understand, that these fall outside of this audit. So, do we audit our internal controls separately?
Do we audit them separately? No, the Poon Group did go through our internal controls.
I'm sorry, Kathleen, your the sound is going in and out.
Sorry, I don't know what that is. Can you do, and Francis, you guys go through our internal controls and review them? So they're basically auditing them.
Yeah, President, and one of the things that what we do is we go through, like, the auditing standard require us to go through the risk assessment process. Even earlier in my slide, we say that it's we are not like we will consider internal control, but we are not opining on the effectiveness. However, during our audit process, we are going through a series of procedures to evaluate your internal control and perform risk assessment. A couple of the procedures that we perform, including understanding of the entity itself, looking at your operations, the businesses that you guys dealing with, but down to the accounting level, we look at financial reporting, how you basically do your month-end close, year-end close, how you do your journal entries, how you do your bank reconciliation. Also take a look at the revenue cycle, because majority of them are coming from property tax. So the internal control wise is much easier for us to audit on the cash receipt wise. We look at expenses, how you deal with vendors, how you deal with contractors. And then also we spend significant amount of time in the payroll function, because payroll is the biggest expenditure that you have besides the capital asset. And also on the actuarial study, that's rely on a lot on the HR information. So we perform what we call the census data testing, and then also testing the internal control over the employee record, making sure that your people are getting paid properly according to the MOU. And then also, last but not least, we also going through a general IT general control questionnaire with your IT department. So based on all the information, we do look at the information, but we are not opining on the effectiveness of the internal control. But at one point, we will be able to rely on the internal control because we test enough of the based on the auditing standard, we test enough sample. That's why we are able to rely on your internal control and for the year and plan it out for our year-end audit.
Thank you. If you don't render an opinion on the effectiveness of those internal controls, then how are those evaluated? How are we to know if they are effective?
Well, basically what we do is we perform the procedures up to a certain level to make sure that we are comfortable to test a certain portion of your year-end transactions to determine whether the account is fair present or not. So basically, the internal control relies on a couple of things. We look at the valuation, the existing and occurrence, the cutoff. Everything that we look at is surrounding the internal control. If you actually needs to perform the effectiveness and having an auditor to opine on the internal control, something that the district also needs to perform is your testing of your own internal control in order for the external auditor to opine on it, and then having an integrated audit, which will cost the district a lot more, will cost the district almost like triple or quadruple to perform the internal control audit.
So, and that would be referred to as an integrated audit?
Yes.
Okay, have we ever done such a thing, or is it done customarily in public agencies?
It's not common.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, a lot of public agency like yourself just relying on the financial auditor, because we fully evaluate during our audit process. We do consider internal control.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
I had just one more.
Chuck?
We have a number of contracts with, well, I'm not sure I guess they are contracts, like with the federal government, we get reimbursed for providing certain services. For the state government, we get reimbursed for certain services. And I think we have some other various contracts. Do you have to do any special auditing for our contracts?
Well, because the district has spent more than $750,000 in federal expenditure. So on the federal side, those are your federal contract. Yes, we perform additional procedures following the Single Audit Act to perform the compliance audit. So basically, the compliance audit under the Single Audit Act, there are 6 mandate requirements on each different types of program. For sure, we look at the allowable cost, the cost principle. Those are making sure that the amount that is spending on those grants are eligible for the particular program. Some of the state will require us to, will require the district to have an additional compliance on certain program, but to my understanding, there's none coming from the state. But for sure, the federal, we are required to go through the Single Audit Act to perform the compliance audit on those.
So let me just ask the question again, and just to make sure I've understood what you said, all the required audits that you have completed. There isn't anything that we did not do it, to your knowledge.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yes, Virginia.
Jim, I just wanted to thank the staff too, Kathy, for doing such a great job. And Ken, thanks for all of the, just keeping us in check as usual. So thank you, Kathy, Ken, and, all of your staff, Kathy, who've helped move forward again, a great budget. And Robert for being on the finance committee with me last year too.
All right. Well, I will thank Kathleen and Mr. Pun and Ms. Kuo, and thank you so much for your work and the presentation this evening.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, that brings us to the consent calendar. Does anyone want to pull an item off?
I'll move to approve the consent.
Second.
And Rob seconds. All right, any discussion?
I had just one. Oh,
Director McLaughlin, I just wanted to note really quick that we did receive one public comment actually, never mind. I take that back.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right, Chuck, did you have a comment?
yeah, I just wanted to mention on the calendar, the meeting date calendar, I just wanted to record the fact that the finance committee did meet. It's shown on the agenda that there would be no meeting of the finance committee, but in fact, that was not the case.
Right, I think that was a special meeting, right?
It was a special meeting.
Yeah.
Will that require a revision to this agenda or any other records?
I don't think it was because it was a special
It
meeting.
was,
Our calendar is based on our regularly scheduled meetings, not special meetings. So unless Steve says otherwise, I think it's okay.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to catch up. What is this is on item number 6?
On the calendar, for the consent calendar, on the district's board and committee meeting calendar for 2021, I have for January, the committee meetings I have not available. However, the finance committee did meet, but not on the regularly scheduled day. So it was not included as part of this calendar. Is that okay? Or Director Bernstein is asking if it should be included on or changed on this calendar.
so yes, it's item number 6, Steve, in the consent calendar.
Thanks, I'm there. I think either way is fine from a legal perspective. I'm all in favor of not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. So whichever way you'd like to handle it is okay by me.
That's how I got through college, so I'll go with that.
A question, if I may.
Yes, Robert.
It gets back to the original question I mentioned earlier about a board meeting. And I asked if the board meeting, if the board in January decided to move the meeting in February to a Thursday and agreed upon it, then it become a regular board meeting. Or if it didn't, then it become a special meeting. So it seems like this falls in that same category, maybe, where the board did not approve the switch in the meeting. Then would it then become a special meeting? As I think, I don't know if Virginia talked about it, it was a special meeting.
Yep, I think you're exactly right, Director Jones. But for the fact that we're talking retrospectively about what happened, if I understand the issue, you're talking about how to identify the Finance Committee meeting that already happened in January. But you're right that the board could tonight say the April meeting of the EPREP committee is not going to be on April 6th, it's going to be on April 8th, but we're still going to call it a regular meeting because we're adopting it tonight in advance. But my comment about calling it either way has to do with the fact that it's a meeting that's already happened. So what you adopt for your calendar going forward with regard to a meeting that's already happened, I'm fine with calling it either a special or a regular meeting. Or NA, as it presently is listed on the calendar. Does that? Everybody looks confused now, so
I mean, I think the regular meetings are the 72-hour notice and the special meetings are the 24-hour notice. So I think that if we have this calendar of the regular meetings, at least
that's right. That's exactly right.
Right. I mean, because I do think that'll help the public understand when our regular meetings are. If we need to call special meetings, then I guess we need to, but.
If you adopt this calendar, the calendar you adopt will be the schedule of your regular
meetings. Yeah.
All right, Robert, any?
No, I'm good. I'm okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right, I think it's been moved and seconded then to adopt the consent calendar. Hearing no more discussion. Michelle, could you call the roll?
Yes, Director Crawley? You're on mute right now. I'll come back to Director Crawley.
No, I don't know. My screen keeps shrinking, so aye.
Thank you. Director Jones?
Aye.
Director Solano?
Aye.
Oh, was that a yes?
Aye.
Oh, thank you. Director Bernstein?
Aye.
And Director McLaughlin?
Aye. All right, moving on. Item number 7, consider and approve committee and liaison assignments. As I am directed to do by the board policy, I prepared the assignments that you have before you. I surveyed everyone in advance, and again, as much as I could, tried to pair up interest and experience, and that is what led me to make the assignments that you see there. So any questions or comments? Virginia, did you have something?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the assignments?
And just a real quick question. I was curious to know who was the San Francisco Creek liaison last year.
I believe you were. So not wanting to interfere with the continuity.
Okay, thank you.
Chuck, do you still want that to do that? Because if
That's
not,
fine.
I'll do it. I've always had an interest in that, but I kind of taken myself out because I knew you lived there, but I don't know if you have your hands full.
No, I'd like to follow up on that.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
no problem. Thanks.
All right, well, it's been moved and seconded. If there's no more discussion, Michelle, please call the roll.
Director Crowley,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Solano,
Aye.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin.
Aye. All right, thank you. And as discussed earlier, I would ask that the liaisons, if you would meet with the proper people in your jurisdictions and make arrangements for joint meetings. It sounds like there's an interest on virtually all of them, so I'll look forward to that. All right, brings us to our next item. Number 8, consider and review the policy allowing members of the public on standing committees. Virginia, I believe you introduced that topic last month. Do you want to introduce that?
Yeah, just a couple months ago. I mean, I introduced, well, I asked that it be put on a future agenda item. And before we actually have the discussion, I'm just wondering, I mean, there are two choices. We can either have the discussion tonight, or we can kick it back to the HR committee for refinement or, suggestions, keeping it the same. I think this could be done at the committee level, since this is the board's policy and procedure or policy. I mean, you've already assigned committees, Jim, liaison, the committee makeup and the liaison. So, I mean, we don't have any resident representatives. So if this is an opportunity for the HR committee to refine the policy, I'm happy to kick it back into that committee.
All right. Any other, Stephen?
Yes, since the item is agendized, I thought I would say one thing now for the whole board that the HR committee could then consider, which is an issue that comes up all the time when there are committees with public members on them, which many agencies do, and there's nothing inherently problematic from my perspective, but realize that a public member of a board is subject to the Brown Act restrictions just like an elected member of the board is. So for instance, if Director Jones, you and Director McLaughlin are on a committee with Joe Public, and that member Joe Public is on the board, neither one of you may speak outside that public meeting with Joe Public about items within the jurisdiction of that committee, because that would be a majority of the committee having a meeting. But if Joe Public is not on the board, but is just a member of the public, there is nothing that prevents either one of you from talking to a member of the public anytime you like. And so by having a member of the public join the board of a committee, everybody just needs to realize that that restricts the kind of conversations that can happen under the Brown Act. And that's not a good or a bad thing. It just is what it is. So I just thought I'd let you know that.
Yeah,
Well,
I think that's right, Steve. So that's why if, you know, for refinement or nothing, no change or whatever to the HR committee would be, you know, I'm happy with that. And Steve's right about the Brown Act being applicable to all board members, including the public representatives.
Chuck?
I wanted to follow up with Stephen. Stephen, what about I guess it's Form 700 or the financial disclosure reports? Are they subject to that also?
So that is an interesting question that it's hard to answer with certainty. My advice generally has been that a public member of the Finance Committee probably would become a Form 700 member because they are even as a non-voting member, are participating in discussions that directly affect the district finances. I am less certain about a public member of any of the district's other standing committees, and I think I'm generally open to the concept that such a public member would not have to become a Form 700 filer.
Jim?
Rob?
But it's a really good question. I'm glad your antennae are up about that, for sure.
Let me ask you, is it the district's responsibility then to implement that?
You mean to require a public member to file the Form 700?
Yes, and then follow up to make sure it's done and so forth.
Yes. And it would have to be on, identified on the person would have to, the person would have to be identified on the conflict of interest code. I'm thinking out loud here, unless, the short answer to your question is yes, the district has responsibilities with regards to those public members that become Form 700 filers. But again, my view is that's really only the case for the Finance Committee. So it's particularly sensitive to have a public member on that type of committee.
Jim?
Rob?
Yeah, Stephen, can the board require any committee that has a public member file the 700 form, even though it's not finance?
Can the district require someone to file a Form 700 even if it's not required? I think I probably should take that back and get back to you on that. My initial answer is no. The definition of who's a Form 700 filer is set by statute, and if you're not a Form 700 filer, I don't believe the district can just go out and say, you must file a Form 700 and you must file a Form 700 if that person does not meet the definition. But I acknowledge that that's not a question that I necessarily can answer off the top of my head.
All right.
All right.
But it's a good question. I'll find out the answer.
Rob?
Jim, could I continue? Yeah, thank you. Stephen, I can see pretty much a slam dunk involving the Finance Committee, but an example maybe would be like strategic planning to get maybe their opinion on some future development or purchases or things like that, where it's not like they're going to be like have a vote at the table, but they are involved in the discussion. And that's why I bring up that with the 700 form and that as an example, being on strategic planning.
It's a good example. I think if and when, I guess I might suggest that if and when there are public members of these committees, we should examine that with regard to the specifics of each particular committee. But you're right that the Strategic Planning Committee approaches that what's probably a grayish area.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. Thanks, Jim.
Chuck?
Yeah, Stephen, I wanted to follow up. And the reason is I'd like to encourage public participation. I think the more interest we can engender in our community, the better it is. People get involved. And I know kind of at one end of the spectrum, we had in the Emergency Preparedness Committee, a number of people who attended meetings because we were discussing issues that were important to them. And it's something I'd like to see more of. I'm wondering if there's another title or another category. I'm thinking, for example, sometimes on board of directors, you have observers who are not board members, but they have committed themselves to coming to meetings. Is there some other title? And I feel like I'm splitting hairs here. I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to see if the actual word matters.
I think the word probably does matter. Certainly, the purpose of the Brown Act agenda requirements are that any member of the public who wants to come may come to your committee meetings, and they may commit to come, or they may come without the commitment. And I would not like my comments to be, interpreted as discouraging participation in public meetings. That's not at all my concern. It's just when folks participate as members of the legislative body of a committee, they become subject to the rules of the Brown Act. That just is what it is. I think if you gave them a different title, I suppose depending on how you went about it, it might make a difference. Again, remember what I said earlier about there's the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. And if you called someone a board observer, but empowered them with all the rights of a member of the board, of the committee, I'm not sure that the title would make a difference.
Jim?
Robert.
So that leads me to a clarification. Then it's really, I've been wrestling with what is the purpose of a title if people are enthusiastic about participating in the conversation about a particular topic area. And so for me, it's so like, well, why do we need to call this person a community representative? They are coming to the meetings and participating in the meeting. What is about? I mean, I know unless it become an ego kind of thing that you need to have a title in order to participate. But if the individuals are coming to participate in the discussion or is interested in an area and had to have their say or their opinion heard at that particular meeting, what's in the title? I mean, I'm kind of confused at that point in time. It seemed like the person would then come and communicate. Is it the structure? Are the individual limited in their conversation or what they can say at the meeting if they're not a community representative? I'm kind of confused here at this point in time. Why we even have the community representative in title if a person can come and say what they want to say at the meeting?
Steve, I'll pick that. That's reflects some of my sentiment on this topic, Robert, and as the chair of the HR committee, that is what I would like. I like Virginia's idea to refer this back to the HR committee, where we can take up those kinds of issues and concerns. If you designate one person as a citizen representative, does that create the impression that there isn't room for anyone else to come to the meeting and be heard? And I think a lot of this, I think, falls to the committee chair to be inclusive of anyone that wants to be involved in the process. I know that'll be my attitude. That'll be my approach again as the committee chair. If there are people that want to be involved in the process, I'm not going to limit them to 3 minutes. There won't be any lights on the table. I invite, welcome their involvement, and but those are the kinds of discussions I envision having at the HR committee level.
Steve, though, isn't it correct though that members of the public that come to a committee meeting can't you can't get into a discussion with the committee members about the agenda item? They can provide a public comment, but they shouldn't receive anything more than basic feedback from the committee members.
Well, that is a very good point, Michelle, that the rights of the public at a meeting are to address the governing body, not to participate as an active member in the discussion, but that's the floor of their rights. I would say it's the, you know, at a committee level, if the members of the committee wish to engage with a member of the public on a particular item, that doesn't cause legal troubles. But you're absolutely right as to that's an important distinction between being a member of the public and being on the board of the committee.
Right. That doesn't mean that the public wouldn't be heard. I mean, I am actually in agreement with Robert and Jim on I think, if I'm hearing y'all correctly, on your viewpoint. But that does not preclude the public from participating. In fact, I have been on another board where the Brown Act has been violated or was violated from public members. And I don't want the district to be put in, our fire district to be put in that situation. So that's why, I mean, I think the committee can do its work and, you know, come back with a recommendation whenever it's ready to do so. But I think I share Robert's sentiment and Jim's too, but, you know, knowing that there's limited participation, but at the same time, just we don't get hit with potential legal liabilities as well.
One last comment along that line, Jim, if I may.
Yes.
If there's, for example, one person, if we stick with the structure, we have a community representative, does it preclude the fact, and that person who's on there can have a free-flowing, I assume they have a free-flowing conversation with the other two board members. If that's acceptable, then that to me, it seemed like it limits anybody else who may have an opinion to come and share their opinion, which may be opposing to the community representative. So if we're gonna, I don't know if we can have a free-flowing conversation with any community member in a particular area, or if it has to be a special meeting that is open to everyone. That's the challenge, it seemed like, that we really need to kind of get to kind of understand. Do we want a free-flowing type of situation, or do we want to limit it to where we have it right now, a community representative? So
what do you mean by free-flowing, Robert? I'm not sure I understand.
For example, okay, let's say Jim and Rob are on the committee, and say like Chuck is the community representative, and you and I, can we just, as another community member, can we just charge into that meeting and engage that committee with our viewpoints and have a discussion with them? If we got a community representative and we limit, so the community representative represents the community, and so everybody else can't come and voice their opinion, which may be opposed to that community representative opinion.
Yeah, those are, Robert, those are great points. And I would like to consider those in the committee. Are some citizens more equal than others? I mean, if you allow one to be the community represent, if I understand your comments,
right?
So those are the kinds of issues I would like to consider in the committee. So do we need a motion to refer this to the committee, or can we just do it by consensus?
By consensus is fine.
Chuck, I believe you had something.
Yeah, I think it is a good idea to refer it to the committee, but I'd like to just sort of, to the charge of the committee, add the idea of somehow trying to broaden our awareness of the committee meeting to more people. So I'm kind of echoing something that Robert was suggesting, that a community representative who in fact does not represent the community, might come from the community, but certainly wasn't elected by the community, that there could be a problem there in terms of other people. I'd like to see us have as broad an involvement by the community as possible. One of the problems is that people don't know about these meetings. And I hope the committee could discuss how we might have kind of an interest group meeting, a mailing list or something of that sort, whereby people that were interested in emergency preparedness matters or finance matters or whatever would actually get a notification of the meeting automatically when the committee was, being convened, just to help alert them to the whole thing. So rather than just talk about the policy, I'd like to talk about how we could broaden our reach to the community as well.
No, I've made a note of that, Chuck. That's a great point.
I'd like to just note for the record that we do have a listserv and everybody, we have over 100 people that are notified of all the meetings, just so you know.
Is the list served by different committees or just by the whole board?
It sends out, anytime there's a committee meeting or a board meeting, I send out a notification to everybody that's on the list, letting them know the date and the time of the meeting and what the meeting is, and then where they can go to click on the agenda to see what's on there if it's a subject they're interested in.
Yeah,
Well, I think it's a great idea. I'd like to suggest maybe we could be putting that on our agendas and so forth, so that people do see that they can subscribe by somehow.
I mean, I've been getting, thank for that reminder, Michelle. I've been getting those updates. I'm on the list and I've been on that list for years. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how we want to, give more notice to the public. Maybe we should put it on the agenda, but I mean, there is a listserv. I know that people do receive the notices.
We'll consider that in our meeting.
Yeah.
Rob?
Yeah. Michelle, we don't actually publish with the local media that we do have a meeting, other than if they list it in their public remarks section. So
We don't advertise with any newspapers, not the board meetings or the committee meetings.
Well, maybe we should post that with some of our media, just to put our agenda on there and take out a small ad.
Rob, we'll take that up in our committee. That's we'll take a look at what we're doing now, what we could do, and the value.
Great. Okay, thanks. Okay, I'm just thinking that some do and some don't, and we should get it out there as Chuck suggested, and Virginia. Thank you.
All right. Well, we will refer this then to the HR committee, and which will meet next month, and we'll take up the issue.
Director McLaughlin, I do want to point out, this is the one where we did receive a public comment via email, and I forwarded it to all the directors, and I will note that in the minutes.
Thank you, Michelle. And I meant to make comment that we had a well-considered, well-thought-out email delivered before the meeting on this topic. And again, I would like to review and consider those in greater detail. So thank you. All right, moving on. Item number 9, consider and discuss the accreditation project status. So Chief, do you have something for us there?
You should have a staff report. If Michelle can hook up Chief Navarro, I know he's should be on the call and prepared to answer any questions or walk through this with you. So Michelle, did Manny get hooked up tonight?
I don't see his name on the list.
So if he's not here, I'm happy to go through it with you.
Yeah, please do, Chief.
Yeah, let me get to it. So just trying to keep everybody updated. And again, whether you choose to put this out there for the strategic planning committee or how you want to do it. I mean, our highest goal, or my highest goal, is accreditation. It is within reach this year. We just discussed it today again, what needs to get done this year. Manny did a good job of trying to give you an update where we are. You know, the CPSE is obviously a regulatory entity that has its own set of rules under accreditation that we have to follow. Manny's been doing that. He gives you the process laid out on page 47 or page 1 of his report. I don't think we need to go over that. We've done it before, but he tried to give you categorically, you know, where we are in the 1 through 3. On page 2, it talks about governance and administration, assessment and planning, strategic planning specifically, which we've had discussion around, and to be very specific to the chief's report and what was given to me by Belinda, the consultant. And obviously part and parcel to what the board is doing is to line up the strategic plan with your efforts there with the consultant and the efforts that were done last year. So it does go beyond really what the consultant's doing with you. It has to all interrelate to the strategic plan. That then is part of this accreditation process. He goes through, you know, the recommended, deferred, and denied, and those categories in there in terms of where we are and how that works with them. He talks about the 252 performance indicators, of which right now we're 90% completed. We hope to apply or to submit this year, obviously. And he goes through in summary the different points. If you want me to cover those, you know, I mean, I think the first one, you know, we did the standards of cover and the risk assessment. The strategic plan is complete. Contracts for analytics have been completed. What that is vendor data that's gleaned from the dispatch center. We just switched to a different vendor based upon the county now operating a more robust CAD system. It goes through like I said, the 252 performance indicators, the application phase, that's what we're in. And then the categories, which I just listed, 1, 2, and 3. And then the mentor's comments and status, which today is what we were going over. We have an assigned mentor. That mentor Manny reports to, and it kind of keeps us on track as to what are they, you know, since we're in the application phase, what are they looking for? Obviously, the goal when you go through the application phase is to be successful. So that's why you have a mentor, and we spend time going through mentor comments so that, in fact, you know, we make adjustments along the way. If there's things that we're not doing, we try to do them. If there are things that we are doing, we try to evaluate, is it adequate or is it good enough as listed above? You know, again, recommend, deferred, or denied. Is that something that we're successful with?
Yeah.
Excuse me, Chief. Rob, did you have a comment?
Yeah. You know, I don't think we really want the chief to go through the whole report again. What I'm concerned about is, Chief, if there's type of a guesstimate of when we're going to be completed with this accreditation, you know, what's your best guess?
We're going to submit here. I don't have the month for you, but it is obviously this year.
Okay.
Mandy's getting ready to do that. And then, you know, again, the goal is to be successful, right? To get accredited. So it will be this year. There was, you know, the plan was last year, I think, as you recall, COVID hit, they kind of disappeared. The mentor we were assigned no longer could be our mentor for, I can't remember, for reasons of no longer being the chief or not being, you know, able to be assigned to this or have the time because of COVID. So we've struggled like everybody with, you know, the impacts of the pandemic and what we could and couldn't do. But for sure this year, that is the plan.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Jim?
Yes.
Yeah, if this could be referred to the Strategic Planning Committee and to basically provide the Strategic Planning Committee with some type of timeline guesstimate relative to when this year it will be completed and what areas that need to be addressed specifically to get this done.
I'm not sure understand, Rob, what the what the value added would be with the strategic planning committee.
Well, to report back to the board as to, unless the chief wants to tell us now what the areas are that we need to address before we get the accreditation process completed.
So that's, as you look on his additional pages, it gives you on page 3 and 4, you know, what's completed, what's not completed. What I don't have, and he's not on the call tonight because I know now I realize he's working on some other project related to this for the staff meeting, but he could better tell you that than I can. However, you know, to what Director Solano is saying, and however the board chooses to do it, whether you choose to do it on a monthly basis or however through a committee, you know, part of accreditation is feedback, right, to the board. So, you know, that's something that obviously needs to be done. And, you know, however you choose to do it, whether it's chief's report or a report every month, at this point, you know, I'm open to either way, committee, board, but it does have to be reported out to the full board. So whether that's a chief's report or a special report, as we enter this kind of last phase, it is going to become important.
You know, I'd like to suggest this, you know, that that it go to the strategic planning committee. And I think where I see the value is if Chief Navarro could make, you know, really present this to that committee. And then, you know, since the strategic planning committee is responsible for, you know, the board's, you know, areas of emphasis and whatnot, just to make sure that nothing has slipped, that those are still in alignment, and perhaps that should happen before we have our workshop on the topic.
Yeah, Jim.
Rob.
Yeah. No, you know, I have the report here and I'm looking through it, and as you know, Chief, you know, some areas are going to be harder to do than others and going to take longer than others. And that's why I think, as Jim just said, you know, kind of give the initial committee kind of a brief orientation or whatever, and then we can bring the entire packet to the board for final review. So I think that's a good idea, Jim, that we get more of a specific breakdown and present it to the board, hope, you know, to be completed by this year.
Virginia.
Jim, so thanks. I would, you know, obviously refer things to a committee, but I think the strategic plan is such an important plan and document that it really, I would feel more comfortable if it were coming to the full board, and either in another presentation as Manny completes, it gets further along, or, you know, completes it more in terms of progress. I really don't want filtered information or tidbits that are, you know, taken out. I want to hear the full thing, since this is a fire district strategic plan. I don't want the board, I think it's only fair to the full board that we hear the whole thing, good and bad, because it's our responsibility to do what's best for the full district. The full board needs to do that. So, you know, I just would feel more comfortable if we were all able to give our input.
If I could focus back on what I suggested, and again, perhaps, you know, we could work with that, is you know, asking Chief Navarro to make the presentation to the strategic planning committee with the goal of making sure that the board goals and areas of emphasis that the strategic planning committee is charged with developing, that they're still in alignment. I'm not sure where the filtering would come in that you're describing.
Well, I mean, if Chief Navarro is supposed to give a presentation to the strategic planning committee and they don't like parts of it that maybe the rest of the board would like, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, I just don't want this to happen. You know, maybe parts of the other, like another board member might like something, and that may not, you know, come out of the strategic planning committee to the full board. I mean, if you're saying that the strategic planning committee is a sounding board for practicing a presentation before the full board, that's one thing. But for me, if the strategic planning committee needs to, if the charge, as I hear it, and maybe I'm misunderstanding it, if the charge is to give direction to Manny, I don't think that's right, because I think a strategic plan for the district must come from the entire board and not a subset of the board.
Yeah, Robert?
Jim, that this kind of leads me into my question. It mainly is the clarity as to, I'm okay going back to I get it going back to the strategic planning committee, but what is the charge? What I heard was the charge initially, and I think it came from Rob, maybe it came from you, was what is left to be completed and what time frame the completion is, what is the expectation of the time frame to complete it? So to complete the whole, to complete everything this year, as the chief mentioned, it be completed this year. Is there, what I thought we were solving for was kind of nail down the timing on it, this year. But what I'm hearing right now also is that there are some areas that still need to be completed, and how did that factor into a time frame? So that's what I thought the committee was going to focus on. I could be wrong,
but Chuck?
I have a question and then a comment. A question of the chief. Chief, how much was the fee that we paid for this project?
I don't remember anymore. There is a fee that we pay to even go to submittal. I can find all that out. I mean, Manny's more in tune with what we paid for different parts of this.
My recollection is it's a pretty minor fee.
Yeah, it's not an exorbitant amount.
Well, let me just say, and this is sort of a note of frustration here. In some ways, this is a personal comment. I'm tired of taking so long on this thing, and I certainly don't want to hear COVID-19 as an excuse. The fact is, there's no reason why this reviewing of paperwork can't take place at someone's home. Somebody can work at home and get this done. And I think we ought to be pushing really hard to get this done. It's costing us, in terms of internal staff, probably $250,000 a year to be working on this. And I just think it's too much time to be looking at little papers. I mean, even if 10% of the goals are still to be somehow written, that's 25 goals. That's something you should be able to do in a day or two. And I would like to see us, submit in 30 days, 60 days, whatever, get on with it, and then push this committee or, the mentor or whoever this is, get somebody there, get them to read it and give us the approval. I don't want to go begging for this. The fact is, we are who we are. If they don't like us, let them say it. But we're waiting for nothing. And it's been a year that it seems like nothing has happened. And I just think it's time to draw this to a close and be done with it. CPSC or whatever they're called, they owe us more attention. And maybe we did pay a minor fee. I'm not sure. I suspect it was at least $10,000, maybe $50,000 to get this done. We don't get a rebate because of COVID-19, and they ought to get off their butts and get this done. I'm tired of waiting for this.
So just to give you a sense and to answer that, and I've had one further thought, kind of in alignment with what guest Director Bernstein just presented. Don't forget, along the way, we've done standards of cover, risk analysis. Now we brought in a vendor to deal with the new CAD, so we get 3 years of good data. So, there's been progress all along. There's no doubt about it. It's taken longer, I think, than we wanted, but obviously quality is part of this too. And we can ask the mentor, I guess, maybe that's a good place to start, where some of this needs to be as well, because to the point of, what would make this the most successful in formatting, at a committee, a board, we could certainly ask that question as well and figure out, which is the best format. To date, they like to have the whole group, the whole board be updated. Obviously, that makes some sense. I don't know if that means it excludes a committee, but it's certainly worth probably asking the question.
Well, perhaps as part of this committee, I don't care whether it goes to the whole board or to the strategic planning committee, but maybe we could hear from the mentor also. Maybe we could get that person on the call just to find out from that person when this is all going to be done.
Yeah.
Rob?
Yeah. All points are well taken. I can see where if it did go to committee, to strategic planning committee, you could individually take each task and have Manny explain what the reasoning is or what the timeline is going to be, and kind of get more of a individualized attention relative to some of these areas that need to be addressed, and then bringing it to the entire board in its totality so the board can review it and approve it.
Well,
Thank you, Jim.
I'll just share my thoughts. I mean, the strategic planning committee, I think this accreditation does fall within their purview. I think that's the proper place for it to be, but I think we really need to be clear on what we expect to happen in the committee. Again, I think perhaps Chief Navarro would find it useful to get some, have the opportunity to discuss the particulars and describe. I'm a veteran of a similar accreditation process, and I know it's a lot more than just writing, some memos. There are standards that you have to adhere to, and if you don't meet that standard, then it may be a training issue, equipment issue. That things have to happen, have to be completed before you can meet that standard. So it's an involved process that you're with a lot of different variables. You have the internal ones, how quickly can you do those things, and then the accreditation body, how quickly can they move and whatnot. So I think it would be useful to have that happen between Chief Navarro and the committee. And I don't think, and I haven't heard that the committee would be giving direction to Chief Navarro or altering his course. I think the process itself is pretty structured, but I'm not sure there really is an opportunity to give direction. It's pretty well prescribed. So my thought is, I'd like to hear a motion on what is the charge to the committee. So Virginia.
Well, I mean, I agree that there should be a charge and not just a free-for-all charge. I don't agree that the strategic planning or that the accreditation fits only within the narrow realm of the strategic planning committee. I think it's for the full board. This is an accreditation for the fire district, and we are the fire board. So I mean, if we want to discuss what the strategic planning committee should be doing, which I think should be more specific rather than, like I said, if this is something that, if Manny wants to practice his presentation to the strategic planning committee before he brings it to the board and out in the in a public meeting, that's one thing. But I just want to make sure that, that the board isn't left out of information that Manny could be, or should be, could be, would be providing, because a committee doesn't necessarily like the information or doesn't think it fits in there. I just don't want it to be, I just want the information to be confined to 2 people on the committee. And it's not, I would be saying this no matter who's on the committee. Just let me make it clear, it has nothing to do with the people on the committee members, you know, so, because I mean, I have faith in that. I just, in the committee members, it's just, I think the strategic plan, I mean, not the accreditation is something that the full board has been privy to in our public meetings. And I just want to make sure we're on the same course as we have been. I do agree with Chuck that it needs to be done pretty quickly, but you know, there have been a lot of other things. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. I think it just needs to go to the full board. So I'm, you know, if there's a motion to take it back to the strategic planning committee, I'm not in favor of that, but I'm one person.
Robert?
I think there's 2 things, and you know, I'll be happy to make a motion, but, and I want to just throw it out there first. I think the first thing needs to be, it appears that there are some things that's still left to be done. I think that needs to be flushed out. You know, and I can see the strategic planning committee flushing that out with Manny, to be clear. And I think once that's flushed out, then you can bring that to the board so we can all have a clarity as what's really left to be done. Because I see open areas in this chart that in progress, candidate agency, I see in the bottom, you talk about two areas is in process, and then everything else needs to be completed except for when it gets down to the analytics. And then there are some areas, some open areas that seem like need to be done. So to really kind of flush, is that it? And flush that out. I can see some work need to be done by the committee to kind of understand that. And once that happened, then bring it to the board so we can all have it clear. And then the second part is having to do with, which will fit, excuse me, before I go there, to really fit into what Chuck brought up earlier, looking at a time frame when it can be done. I think until we can get some idea of that, then we really, I mean, we can push for tomorrow, but you know, based on what comes back to us on what really needs to be done from Manny and that committee, then we really don't know how long that's going to take. Then I think we put a time frame, begin to put a time frame around the completion aspect of it.
I think I heard a motion.
That would be my motion. It would be to flush out through the strategic planning committee what is remaining left to be done in those. And it seemed like it's only those 2 areas that I mentioned. It's within the application agency, excuse me, the candidacy agency. There's in progress noted there, and then the analytics. There's some work. It seemed like stuff need to be done there. Is that about your assumption, Chief?
Yeah, so what I'm hearing, which I think is in line and fair, which is when's it going to be done and what's left?
Right.
Well, okay, so can okay, now that if there's shape around that, and I don't know, so I need clarity. Are you saying that, Robert, what you're saying is, it will help me understand, is that it's going to be, what you want is going to be more specific in terms of updates? Or because what I don't want is for Manny to feel like he's got to go one way or the other based on pressure without, you know, the full board. But if you're saying that procedurally you want to know, you know, when things are going to be completed, that's a different thing. That's not as substantive as I thought it would be, which I would be okay if there's a very specific structure. And I think Jim is saying the same thing. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jim. Maybe I'm the one that's not hearing this correctly, but I just want more specificity and structure so that whatever comes to the full board is as complete from Manny, not from the strategic planning committee substantively, but from Manny.
I have to say, Virginia, I don't think I've heard anybody suggest that the strategic planning committee would be giving direction to Chief Navarro.
Well, I just want to make sure that that's clear, because that's not what I mean. And maybe, I mean, the fact that I was a little confused could be, you know, due to a number of things, but I just want to make sure that I'm clear that it's going to be more procedural than substantive.
All right.
The only thing I'm trying to say is that I just flush out what's left to be done.
But what does that mean, Robert?
Well, if you look at the chart that was provided to us, current status, it talked about there's the applicant agency that seems like everything is completed in that. It's marked completed. Candidacy agency, there's some work that's left that's in progress. What is that? I don't what it, you know, and then you move on down that chart, got down to the analytics. There seemed like there's one thing that's complete, but then it seemed like there's other things left to be done. So is that the totality of what needs to be done? I think affirmation by the committee is important. Maybe there's some other things that is not, that may be intertwined, is a backdrop to some of these other things that still left to be done, that is not, that is assumed, there's an assumption that maybe there's some other things there. So the question is, the committee talking about what's left to be done and understand what that is.
Well, Manny's here now. Why can't he just give us that update now as a full board?
Directors, this is Manny. I apologize for getting on late.
Thank you, Manny.
I came home and did some dinner and then just napped for a little bit and have my hearing aids out. Quite frankly, if I can help out with the discussion, I'm more than happy to meet with the committee and
Manny,
walk you through with,
Manny, I'm glad you're able to join us. I'm glad you're able to join us. You know, I want to recognize Rob first, and then Chuck, and then
okay.
I'd like to hear from the chief and Chief Navarro. Rob.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Manny. Specifically, what we're really looking at are the items that need to be completed, some type of a specific timeline for them to be completed, and when do you think the accreditation process will be done in order to come to the full board for our review and approval? Okay. And those are my questions right there.
Manny, before you respond, I'd like to go.
Sure.
Chuck?
Yeah, I was going to say, I wasn't sure if Robert had made his suggestion as a motion, but if it was a motion, I'm happy to second it. And then I just have a comment that maybe we can reconcile both a referral to the committee and Virginia's concerns and have it be on the committee agenda for the first week of February and then on the board agenda for the third week. And we kind of take care of both parts at the same time.
All right. So if, again, just procedurally, you know, Chuck, you want it, you know, Robert we'll call that a motion and we have a second. So let's discuss that now. So
can we please, what's the motion?
What I mentioned, the motion that I would make would refer this item back to the Strategic Planning Committee with the understanding of fleshing out what's left to be done with the accreditation, and then also being able to, well, that's the main motion, and I think once the board can kind of get an idea of that, now then you can add on, then you can kind of figure out exactly how long it's going to take for the most part.
Okay, Chuck, is that what you're seconding, Chuck?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now I'd like to go into discussion, but Virginia, before I come back to you, I'd like to involve the chief and Chief Navarro here and get their.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. Thank you so much. The process is difficult to project on out, literally because beside the accreditation process, we had to involve ourselves with other aspects of it. And I try to articulate that as best as possible in the document that I sent you. So, for example, we didn't have a current standards to cover a community risk assessment. So we had to do that, which meant we had to write an RFP and go through that process into a contract, and then work diligently with that group, those consultants, to put that forward. That's been completed. We didn't have a strategic plan. We started that early on and got that done. And basically, these are pieces of accreditation that have to be done before you can come before that board and become accredited. So it was sort of like working on about 3 or 4 projects at one time. The timeline itself is the difficult one, because there is an applicant process where we send in the first 3 categories and a number of performance indicators, and the mentor then works with us to say, ask any questions they want or make any comments. We've been having some difficulty with that because some of the things that they were requiring, they challenged our SOC and our CRA. And it's been, I had to get the consultants involved in that, quite frankly, because I don't know if they're being too rigid or what's going on with the other end of it. We had a long discussion with the chief today on process, which is management process, because we have to answer those questions. I'm hoping we can get through the mentor portion, which is the applicant portion, within the next month or 2. If that's done, we can go and then be assured to go into candidate process, which means they want the next 7 categories done. So I'm more than happy to meet with this committee, walk you all the way through that, show you where we're at, show you some of the documents, show you some of the detail, to give you some assurance. To give you an actual timeline, I wish I could, because once we start down this process, we basically are at whatever the mentor's going to do in terms of, we've got work with him for months. When we do the peer review, they want 45 days with all our data just to review it, and then they're going to start going through that data and asking questions and having us re-edit things and resubmit. So it may be some time working back and forth with the peer review before they say, okay, we're ready for a peer review visit. So I can line all that stuff up. I'm more than happy to sit down with this committee and get you on board. And now is a good time to start taking a really good look at it. As for the analytics, I knew we were going to need those. So I put those as part of the contract for the SOC and the CRA. So we've been getting analytics. I've got 3 years worth. I'm sitting on my desk now that we're reporting out for the chief's annual review. And I contracted for another 3 months to get us to the new CAD system. And I have a new contract now with First Watch for the next 5 years. And I can bring everybody up to speed on what we're doing with that and show you some of the dashboard and some of the analytics we have. Pretty happy with that segment. That looks pretty good. So I think the proposal and the recommendation and what the board just approves sounds great.
All right, thank you for that, Virginia.
So Manny, thanks for that. So I would feel more comfortable if this presentation were done once for the full board, with the full board being able to ask questions instead of having you do the presentation twice.
All right. Any other discussion among the directors?
I have a quick question. I'm not sure what fleshed out means exactly.
Are you referring to Robert's?
To Robert's motion, yeah. What does fleshed out mean?
In when there are when you got a problem, or when you got a situation that comes up, and you're going to try to figure out exactly all the options or all the possibilities. In our case, it's pretty much it's outline of what's left to be done. It's like taking a water hose through a tube and flushing everything out that need to be done. You are making some type of determination as to what all that needs to be done. And I think that's, Manny started talking about it. There may be some other conversation that may need to take place. So that's it's trying to determine the universe of what's left. And the only way you're going to do that, you got to be able to talk about it. So once you have gotten to that conclusion, then you are assuring yourself that this is what really all is left that need to be done.
Thank you. Michelle?
I understand the definition. Jim.
Virginia, I was going to ask Michelle to, if you could give us what you have down as the motion.
I was just going to have it be that the board refers this item to the strategic planning committee to discuss what items need to be completed for the accreditation process.
That's remaining.
Okay.
That's remaining.
Okay. Yeah, so that's pretty specific then.
Okay. We have a motion. We have a second. Any more discussion on this item?
Jim, I'm comfortable with that because it's what Michelle said. If that's the meeting of the minds of all of the board members, because that's not what I was hearing among different board members. But if that's the motion, I'm happy to go along with that because it's very specific.
Okay.
Jim, I have some comments after you take the vote.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, could you call the roll?
Director Crawley?
Aye.
Director Jones?
Aye.
Director Solano?
Aye.
Director Bernstein?
Aye.
Director McLaughlin?
Aye. All right, Chief, did you have some comments?
Yeah, I think maybe the better way to look at this is, for example, my discussion with Manny today and Mike Schaefer, the deputy chief, we have to change, for example, our format for how I conduct our annual staff meeting, okay? Because Manny ran that by the mentor. The mentor commented for it to fit in, seamlessly within accreditation. It needs to follow a certain format. That's not exactly what I've used every year, but I had to be open to that. And I think maybe there's a different way to look at it. I know Director Crawley has some concerns about committee trying to change the format. Look at it a different way. It's reporting to the committee what the board needs to do to maybe change part of what it does, not necessarily the board's going to, tell the mentor how we're going to change, how we're going to be successful, because they know that better than we do. So internally, what we're trying to do is align practices, procedures, and process with accreditation. So, again, accreditation is a good thing. It's accountability. It's visibility on what we're doing as an organization. It's trying to make the organization better. So I would just, maybe think about it a little bit differently. It's not as if you're always going to influence how they want it done. It's more to inform you how, we think it needs to be done through accreditation to be successful, which aligns us with national standards. So one of the reasons we wanted this on the agenda was because we're getting to the point where we're whittling down what needs to be done, and certainly interacting with the board is one of those. Again, how you do it, I would agree, everybody needs to be involved, but I don't think that it hurts to have that brought up at a committee or a board meeting. There's just going to need to be more time with everybody this year to get this thing, hopefully across the finish line and submitted.
Okay, thank you for that.
Jim?
Yeah, Rob Solano.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim. Chief, I wanted to thank you and Manny and your staff. I mean, I've been through these before in my other life, and my hat's off to you to try to make sometimes those round pegs fit in those round square holes. And, you're dealing with an accreditation process and a mentor and, different guidelines. That's why I originally had said to have this come to committee and then work out, as Robert had said, flesh out some of these problem areas, like what you just said, that, the changing of the CAD system is very important to the accreditation. And it's also important to us too, because we've got to update that accreditation. So thank you, Manny, and your staff for going over the moguls, so to say.
Well, and I appreciate that, because, for example, you're going to get the annual report for both 2019 and 2020. We've held off a little bit because trying to line all this up is adjustments we need to make. As you know, we've done, it's not like we haven't done annual reports before, but we're trying to make it so it fits, to your point, in that peg that they want, because it's communications not only with the board, but with the public and what we do. So, we've had to change a number of things so that it fits that format. Like I said, it's, I'm used to what I've done every year for staff meetings, and I just basically turned the whole thing over to Chief Navarro and said, you tell me what I need to do, and if that's what's going to make this work, I'm not fighting that. I just need to make sure that we're going to cover all the bases, because that is the number one priority. So there's you got to find the workable solutions, I guess, is the best way to put it.
All right. All right, I think we're ready to move on to our next item. Number 10, discuss the district's certificates of participation series 2009B status. So I'll throw that to you, Chief, and I don't know if you want Kathleen to speak to this.
Yeah, Kathy's probably in a better position to discuss this because she's the one that keeps up with it. But I know this was something that came up in the committee, and I'm sure the committee members want to give some feedback as well. I know, Director, you've also taken a look at it and so forth, and I know Steve's aware of it, and so I think hopefully have a good discussion and get some direction if that's what you want to give tonight, or at least have a broader discussion. So I'll let Kathy take it from there.
Right. The way, I guess in the official statement, the way it was written, or the way I misread it, was that only the A's were callable, but in fact the B's are also callable. So I guess we need to discuss calling those or not, and if calling them, how many, and funding for that.
All right. Kathleen, I have a couple questions around these. When the bonds were issued, were they issued to fund a specific function or purpose?
Yes, they were issued to fund this building, and what else, Chief? I know it was this building, but there was
this building at the time, Fire Station 2, and then also I think we did some that was getting ready to pay down on the PERS as well. Now, which one of those we picked? I know that was kind of the basket of justifications for what was going to be done. I don't remember exactly which ones of the three, if not all three, that we picked, but that was it at the time.
So, and Kathleen, what process would we go through in determining whether or not we needed to reissue the debt, at the current interest rates, or forego borrowing any additional money? What would that process look like?
If we were to want to reissue them, it's called refunding.
Right. How would we evaluate our financial picture, to make that decision? Yes, we should refinance. No,
I would have a consultant that's called a financial advisor do the review on that, and there's a number of them out there.
Okay.
They want to refund them, they make money.
All right. All right. Are there any other questions regarding this issue?
Jim, I would like to, if I may, follow up on your initial inquiry, and I thought it was your initial inquiry as to the purpose initially for getting the bonds, and whether that purpose is still needed, or in some other area that we may not necessarily know about or thinking about right now. And I guess the chief mentioned there was a couple or Kathy mentioned there was a couple of areas. One, I assume the acquisition of 170, the administration building. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then there was another, I assume another acquisition that took place. So that was the general purpose. And so the question is, will we have the need in the future to be able to fund something else? I don't know, the completion of Station 1. I don't know. And I think that to me would be to kind of get an understanding of that. One, the main purpose, and two, is that purpose still relevant today for something new in the future?
So can I give you a little bit more history? So you got to remember when we started all this a decade ago, here was the landscape. I know it's kind of hard to believe today, given what the fund group just gave us on what our position is, financial position, which is such a great place to be. At that time, you had $6 million in a reserve for facilities. We had 4 fire stations to build. Even the decision to buy admin, I know there's some desire to sell it, but at that time, there was no way to upgrade Fire Station 1 to the tune of what they had proposed, which is about a $19.5 million fire station. So, if you looked at 19.5 million versus 6 in the reserve, that math didn't add up, and you still ended up with 3 stations you had to take care of. So the decision, real quickly to get through it, the decision to buy the admin building, fix it up, was both to use it as another strategic asset, right? Because it's going to increase in value and has, and take the pressure off of Station 1, which allowed us then to focus on Station 2. That's kind of the impetus at that point. But, just to get to it, that $6 million was all that we had to work with. So, that's a much different financial picture than where we are today, where we're fully funding, for example, Fire Station 4 before we even tear it down. So, we didn't have the money available to us for admin necessarily. I mean, it was doable within the $6 million, but not enough to do Station 2. And then equally, and this is why I waver a little bit on the pension issue, is because, and maybe Director Crawley remembers this, is that there was some concern by, at that time, Director Otake, about whether or not we should change our cash position and pay down the PERS, which took about another 2 years for the board to work through, at which point then they decided to start to pay down the PERS side fund. So that's why that timeline's a little hazy for me, because there was just so much back and forth, and we were in the middle of an economic downturn. So
Yeah.
like nobody's ever seen before, right? So at that
we were
point,
getting out of it at the time here. I wasn't on the board, but it was around 2010 when, I think 2009, 2010, when the board at that time, and this is before I was on the board, decided to start paying down. And since then we've paid down over 33 million
right,
over the last 10 years.
So I don't want to say that the bond money was exactly for that. I think it was more facilities, but that was all part of the, the bigger mix of trying to make really, really difficult decisions during a downturn where, we wanted to keep things moving forward, like buying property and starting projects and so forth. But, we're really not in a good position, even out of the starting gate, with only 6 million in the reserve. So that's kind of the history. I mean, again, it's hard to imagine today, but that's what it looked like back then. It was not an easy circumstance, but again, look where we are today.
So I'll address this to both the chief and Kathleen. Is this, are we really facing 2 separate issues here? On the one hand, do we retire or call the 7.25% bonds because we're in a 1% world? And then the second half of that, should we raise that capital? Do we need it? Are those really are these 2 separate issues? Am I looking at that correctly, or is there more involved here?
Well, let me say this before Kathy dives into probably the more competent answer regarding finances. I can only tell you that we did not choose to do. The board changed its policy after it did this and did not want to live in a debt world, and essentially said, hey, we're going to go forward and we're going to save for everything now that we're in this position. Remember, we had a fire station project, and they had made some other decisions regarding reserves and so forth. So there was the other thing that happened in earnest was to put money aside, which was equally not a very easy thing. Sounds easy today, but we're in the midst of a major contract dispute with IAFF. So that equally added more stress to the equation. I don't want to make any of these decisions sound like they were easy, because they weren't. To go to your question specifically, from at least my perspective, A, you don't want to go to debt anymore if you can do it, and we don't need to do it based upon where we are. But B, then it is to I think your main question, this is where Kathy could probably do a much better job than me, is do you want to retire the debt, right? So that's, I think, the bigger question here is, do you want to retire the debt? How does that change our position? Currently, we're also kind of in an unknown world, but we're in a good place. And, as Kathy said, maybe you bring somebody in and do a deeper dive on that, but I'll let her speak to, quote unquote, retiring the debt.
Okay, it looked like Virginia.
Well, Kathleen, why don't Kathy,
Okay.
if you could speak, well.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'd need a FA to analyze, see how much we would save overall or even annually. And because we have a few different things going on, we do have reserve funds for this. There's a reserve set aside that's required by the debt issuers. I mean, by the.
Kathleen, you're breaking up.
I'm sorry about that. Okay, we have a reserve set aside that is required by the bond trustees, and let's see, that is about 1.7 million. And then we have another reserve that we have been setting aside in order to make the debt service payments be even throughout the life of this debt, because you could see they change when we start paying principal off for the 2009 Bs, because in the beginning of them, we're only paying interest for the first 5 years or 5 payments. So I don't know, did that answer your question?
It did. I think, Virginia, did you have something?
Yeah, I think, oh, Robert, do you want to?
No, go ahead. I can wait.
Okay, so it's not even a suggestion on what we should do with the actual bond thing, but this came up in our finance committee as a possibility of looking into it a little further, to make a determination, because staff didn't have all of the work done at that point. So we can always kick it back to the finance committee so that we can have staff, do a little more work, if that's what the board wishes, or we can have this discussion now to, direct Kathy on what to do. But, I think, Chuck was the chair, he chaired the committee, and I think mainly we just wanted to hear what the board members wanted, and then maybe bring this back to the finance committee for further information gathering from the staff. I mean, is that correct, Chuck, from what I can remember?
Yeah, I'll have my own statement though later about it.
I think,
Okay.
Robert?
Well, I think, anytime you can, get something better, if there is something else out there better, and when I say something else out there better, what I'm meaning, alluding to is that we currently got a situation right now that with this bond that we, for a purpose. And I hear Jim is saying, hey, we're in a 1% world right now. Why do we need to keep this 7% thing going on? The question is, if we were to even drive to a 1% world, what would be the purpose of even doing that in terms of what else do we need to look at? I know we're sitting pretty flush right now with cash. Do we have a mechanism to make that cash grow us more cash, or for what we need to have in the future? I don't know how much dollar we're going to really need for whatever we are looking for in the future. And I guess that future part is part of what I'm not sure. And if the answer is yes, we need something else, we need to try to focus on something else in the future. Then what that dollar amount, it does require a dollar amount, and what that number is going to look like. And do we have the cash now? And right now, enough set aside to make that happen? Will we grow that in 5 years as we may projectly need it? Will we have that enough cash set aside from our growth of excess funds to make that happen? So that I'm not sure, and I'm hoping that if it goes back to committee, they kind of flush that out. You know, what is that? If the answer is no, then liquidate it. Let's move on to something else.
Chuck?
Yeah, I'd like to address this because this is something that stresses me greatly. And I want to acknowledge you, Jim, for following up on this. This was information that was publicly available, it turns out, on the internet. You found it and stayed with it. And I say that because I was elected to the board in 2013. I brought this issue up in 2014 because we didn't need this debt then. And we had a hearing on it, which I'll address in a second. And I was told something by an expert that turned out not to be true. And I didn't follow up. And I'm kicking myself today for not following up. But let me just indicate the magnitude of this problem. We have roughly 9 million in debt right now. It's on the financial report. We just got at tonight's meeting. And Jim is right. We're paying 7%. We're in not just a 1% world, we're earning about 1/4% on our money. But let's say the difference is between 7% and 1% is 6%. 6% of $9 million is over $500,000 a year we're throwing away. We're talking about $50,000 a month that we are wasting right now. That's buying us nothing except paying excess interest that we shouldn't be paying. So I think one, yes, we need to explore, and all we got to do is just get together this $9 million and pay it off. And as Kathy was mentioning, we have a couple reserves we've already set aside. One of them is to pay this excess interest. Well, by the time we put these together, that's going to pay off maybe not half the debt, but close to half the debt. And we can move on. We've got the money. There's no problem. We can find this $9 million to pay it off. At $50,000 a month, we ought to be doing this just as fast as we possibly can. But that's step one. Step two here is we were in a meeting and Virginia was a board member then, Rob was a board member then. Piper Jaffray came to us and told us at a public meeting that we could not, for whatever reason, we could not repay, whatever the right word, repayment is the word that's used in the contract. We couldn't do that. And that was simply wrong. And we could have, and Kathy is giving us a date, of a year or two ago. I mean, a year ago, August, when we paid off the A. I'm not 100% sure that that's the right date. That's why I think we need an expert to tell us on this. I'm not sure that's the right date for the Series B. But if it was, we have spent a year and a half. We're talking about over $1 million of wasted interest because of this advisor. And it seems to me there's some culpability there, and that should be explored. We ought to find out if we have a case against Piper Jaffray and make a claim with them for reimbursing this 1 or 2 million or whatever it was that we lost because of their bad advice. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think we pay them something every year for servicing this thing, or we certainly paid them a fee as the underwriter of this when it was offered. So they made money on this. I don't know why they might have a financial interest in having given us bad information, but if they did have an incentive, it even, in my opinion, increases their potential liability. So I think we ought to explore not only the repayment of it, which is essential and be done quickly, but also we ought to examine whether or not there was any culpability here. We ought to go back. The meeting was recorded. We know what the person said. The person also provided a written report. I'm going to go through my records and look for it. But we got bad advice, and I'm going to be a little bit critical of past board here. Nobody was on the board, present members, but we should have had a long-term financial plan back in 2009, 10, when we even took on this debt. I'm not sure we needed it then, but I know that by 2014, when I was on the board, we didn't need this money, and we should have been prepared to pay it back and lower our operating expenses. Right now, again, we're paying $600,000 unnecessarily, and we could get rid of that immediately. So I think there's a couple things we ought to look into, and I'd like to authorize, I actually, at some point, I'd like to make a motion that we authorize either the board president or our attorney to to engage an expert who could tell us what we could have done except for bad advice, and tell us what we should do, engage somebody to tell us what we should do now in terms of paying this off, and if there is any liability on the part of Piper Jaffray that we should explore.
Right. Kathleen, I see your hand. Kathleen, you're muted. You're muted.
Okay, sorry about that.
Here we go.
So we do, these bonds are Build America bonds. And so they do, the IRS does send funds for a large portion of the interest payment. It goes down every year, but for example, let's see, for the time period. So for this year, September, let's see, it would have been August. It'll be February and August debt service payments. We will be getting, let's see, 5.9% back from the IRS out of the whatever percent, 7% that we're paying, just as a FYI.
Can I comment on that, Kathleen? The IRS reneged on that in the past, and they did not pay us the full amount.
They've been decreasing it. They decrease it a certain amount every year.
The minute the IRS reneged on that promise, as I read the contract, we had the right to repay those bonds immediately upon the IRS's failure to perform as they said they would. And we could have redeemed them back then as well. So it's my opinion, again, I think we need some legal advice on this and some bond advice, because I think that voided the contract under which we bought these things. And I think we could have paid them off at par value immediately upon the IRS failing to do what they promised to do originally.
I guess that would be assuming we had the funds, but okay.
Thank you. So I'd like to suggest that Kathy's suggestion that the district engage a financial advisor is a very smart recommendation. And I would also suggest that the financial advisor's advice is probably a first step before jumping to the conclusion that legal advice is necessary as to either what happened in the past or what possible remedies there may be going forward. I think these certificates of participation, as Kathy mentioned, under the Build America program, they're complicated transactions. The district did not have a financial advisor back in 2009, I believe. Piper Jaffray was the underwriter. The underwriter is not a financial advisor with a duty to the district. They're a market maker in the middle. And I think having a financial advisor with a duty to the district to advise as to the status of these bonds and the path forward makes a ton of sense. So I just would like to suggest that Kathy's idea is, spot on and the first and next step. And there are a lot of great financial advisors that if you issued an RFP, you'd get an excellent response from a number of well-qualified firms. And that would be my recommendation as to the immediate next step. But of course, the board may wish to do something different.
Thank you for that. Chuck, I think Virginia was first.
Oh, I actually think that Steve's advice is good and Kathy's as well. I totally agree with you, Jim and Chuck, about, and Robert, about, we're in a very different financial situation for the district, and the financial landscape is completely changed. So if we do go with the financial advisor, I think that we should ask some, pretty pointed questions for specific advice. Like refunding these or, just basically paying it off. I mean, refunding is basically refinancing, and I'm not even sure, going to Robert's point, if that's the best thing to do. I mean, I don't know. So I do think getting financial advice from a financial advisor is good. I'm not sure that I want to sue to get money back. I mean, I don't know. It sounds like, Steve, that you're advising that as well. I don't know. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I think without understanding what the financial advisor is going to give us in terms of advice, I would not feel comfortable making that decision right now about litigation and a legal claim.
For sure, to make sure there's no misunderstanding, I'm
Right.
suggesting you hire a financial advisor as the first step, and it strikes me as premature to reach legal conclusions before you get that kind of financial advice, especially given the role of the underwriter in this
but the role of
transaction.
But the Piper Jaffray is a sell side firm, right? Obviously. And so I'm not sure who is advising. I mean, they should have at least been able to answer the questions of the finance committee at the time. And I can't remember, was it Michelle Brock who may have been in place here as well? So I don't know, maybe there were different needs or whatever, but like I said, we're in a completely different financial landscape. But I agree. Steve, do you have a list of financial advisors that we could look to, or Kathy, or I can get a list, but
Yeah,
we have to do the public process, obviously.
Right. Yeah, and I've dealt with a lot of them a bit. So yes, I know them. I know lots of them to the knowledge.
So that's my 2 cents, Jim. I agree
They're
with
not friends
Miller.
or any of that stuff, by the way. They're
Yeah,
just
yeah.
professional connections.
Okay, thank you. Chuck?
Well,
Yeah, I certainly agree that I think that we ought to get the facts first, and if there is culpability, that we ought to follow up on that, but let's start with the facts. I wanted to ask Stephen, how, is there any way for us to make sure that we don't have a financial advisor who's somehow conflicted about the case?
Sure. I mean, I think Kathy will be able to assist with that too, but it would not be a problem to ensure that your financial advisor provides you with impartial advice. They have, under all sorts of rules of professional responsibility, they have a fiduciary duty to the entity with whom they're giving advice. And so I'm not at all concerned with the ability to hire a financial advisor that will give you complete loyalty.
So if a question for Stephen and Kathleen, what would we ask of this financial advisor? Would it be their job to dissect, the bonds and any payments that Treasury had to make? Would that be one step? And then the second step would be to advise us, doing some financial projections and make a recommendation on, yes, you do need to replace this, or no, you can retire it and not borrow any more money. Are these 2 steps, or are they?
they're not going to look at necessarily what our reserves are. So as far as where our current financial position is, do we have the funds to pay it off, that kind of thing? But they will give us what the cost would be to refund them or to call them, whichever we decided to do.
So with that said, then, should we be considering retaining someone that can do that financial planning? Look at our reserves, look at projected income and expenses, and make recommendations to us about whether or not we should replace those funds.
I guess I missed the beginning of that. Did you say?
Again, is it okay? We'd hire a financial advisor to advise us relative to the bonds.
Right.
Is it a second step then to hire someone to do the long-term financial planning, who would advise us on whether or not we have a gap that, if we redeem these bonds, does that create a gap for us that needs to be filled, or no, you're fine, your reserves are sufficient that you don't need to issue new bonds.
Yeah, I think that's reserves and how much we have in them and things like that have been directed by the board. And usually, yeah, the district is the one we can say whether we do or do not have those funds, depending
should
on
we-
what they're set aside for at this point.
But would you recommend that we hire somebody to advise us on that point?
I wouldn't, I've never done that, so I don't really know who you'd get to do that. I mean, it's usually the finance director's work. So because who would know better what it is you have monies and what they're set aside for and what necessarily what your future goals are for those funds.
So you're saying that you would do that analysis?
Yes.
Okay.
With the board, because depends, we have 28 million or whatever it is in the reserve for CIPs, but the station 4 is going to be about 20 million. So, we have funds, other funds that are set aside for different things that have to be there.
Okay.
Jim,
Virginia?
do you think, so just, I actually think that I think Kathy and her staff would do a good job after we get the facts, but I feel very comfortable just getting a financial advisor. I'd happy to make a motion to that effect too.
All right. Before you do, is there any other discussion or? Right, if you have a motion, Virginia, please bring it forward.
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute. I mean, I'd be happy to make a motion to hire or go out for an RFP to hire a financial advisor to help us get the facts of, within this financial landscape and based on our actual bond issuance, and work with the staff, to determine what the facts are before we take the next step. That'd be the RFP process.
Jim?
Robert?
So help me with maybe defining what those facts are, so it will be clear about which fishing hole we're going into. And that can come from Virginia, since you brought up the facts. So yeah. So I just need to know what the facts are, so we're fishing in the right fishing hole.
Well, I mean, really the issue would be whether or not, what should we do? Should we refund? Should we, pay down everything? I mean, what is it that we should do based on the actual issuance of the certificate of participation, given its interest rate and given the landscape that we're in, which is a very, very different financial situation. So, and I don't know. I mean, whatever Kathy, I think, is going to be looking for too, to do an analysis. I don't know, Chuck, what do you think?
Can I, before we go to Chuck, I think to add to that, I think the parallel to that, it seemed to me it's going to be important is for us to understand, I mean, the board is to understand what it is that's beyond what we can see right now are the fire stations that we need to try to fund. If there are other things in that we need funds for of any significant dollars, maybe by the time we take care of that, we may be so well endowed that we may not need to a bond be issued at that point.
Yeah. So you mean so that we don't do anything and keep the COP in place? Is that what you're saying, Robert?
No, I didn't. What was that again? I didn't catch
so that. And I mean, the other one of the options would be to just do nothing and keep what we've got in place. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying
I'm misunderstanding then.
In addition to, in order to once we get the facts, whatever those facts are that was mentioned, that the board really need to understand beyond beyond financing, completing the developments that we have and having a sufficient amount of funds in order to do that, are there other things that the board wants to engage in that will require resources that we may not necessarily have or will have coming in 5 or 10 years down the road?
Okay, so looking into our future.
Well, I'm hoping that we parallel the fact finding that we need to go through now with looking in the future too.
Right, financial planning.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Okay, sorry, Jim. I'm fine. I just want to conclude with what Robert said. I'm fine with that. But I do think that's where our staff can come in and help us with the financial planning as well, based on what they find from the financial advisor.
Okay. Chuck?
Yeah, let me try to address some of Robert's questions here. I think the facts should include what it is that we are permitted to do under the Series B contract. And can we buy these, can we repay these bonds, or do we repay these bonds at par value? That is what they were issued for, or do we repay them at some current market value? Kind of what are the terms? What are we allowed to do? How much would it cost us? I mean, those are the facts. I would like to have us look at this retrospectively also. When could we have done this? And what did we lose by not doing it earlier, if in fact we could do it earlier? So those are the facts that I think the bond expert could tell us about. I think what you're talking about in terms of a financial plan is something that's kind of been, in fact, I think it received more votes than anything else on our board goals, is to have a long-term financial plan, capital plan. As I calculate it, we're close to having maybe $100 million worth of needs in the next, whenever we could do it. So do we need $6 million? Sure, that's 6% of $100 million. But the fact is we need $100 million. And I think we'd be foolish wasting our money now paying exorbitant interest on $6 million when we could retire that, get a financial plan, and then figure out when we're going to realize the financial plan, how fast we want to do these things. Does it make sense to borrow or not? And make some long-term decisions that way. I don't think the bond expert is going to tell us about the long-term financial needs. That's something that is a separate project altogether.
If I could, I hear that there's an immediate need to examine what we've got and the facts surrounding it. Are they callable? Under what conditions can they be called? Just the baseline facts, and perhaps a look backwards and how did we get here, and then what I'm hearing is then there'd be a second effort to do the financial planning. Do we need, if we were to retire the current bond, do we have a need to go back into the market and sell some additional bonds? So does anyone want to introduce a motion?
Well, so there's a current motion, but there's no second. So if there's no second, then that can die. That motion can fail and we can do a different one.
No, I'll second Virginia's motion to hire a financial advisor to tell us what the facts are about the bonds that we hold or that we've sold.
Okay, thanks, Chuck.
Moved and seconded. Any more discussion? Rob?
Yeah, Jim. Chuck, I want to thank you for finding this.
I don't want to take credit. Jim found it.
Oh, well, whoever found it for finding this. I mean, it's something that I'm just at awe, but thank you guys for finding the error for us.
Robert, I think you had your hand up.
No, I did not.
No?
Sorry.
All right, but Stephen.
I just like to clarify the motion before you vote. Is the motion to issue an RFP to engage financial advisor where the scope is specifically limited to an analysis of this one particular bond issuance. I might suggest that there's no benefit to the district in limiting the scope at this point in the process. You could hire a financial advisor based on their qualifications on an on-call basis and assess their abilities to advise on any number of issues if you so chose. So I just want to make sure what you're voting on right now.
So are you saying, Steve, that we could have one, is it on retention? Because
Correct.
what my whole thing was specifically for this issuance.
Okay,
But,
I just wanted to make that clear, because I heard lots of discussion of also
Well, I'm open to
discussing
broadening it. I'm opening to broadening it, but the issue on the agenda was about this particular COP, this issuance of this debt.
Stephen, could you perhaps describe, the benefit that you see to what you're suggesting by broadening the scope?
You would have the ability, the board would have the ability to engage a financial advisor that could serve as a resource to the district on a number of issues, and you wouldn't have to go back out for an RFP for this and an RFP for that and an RFP for this, but you would, in one procurement, engage a financial advisor. This may be the issue that's right in front of you right now, but it may be helpful to have a financial advisor on call. I'm hesitating because it's really, I don't want to step on Kathy's toes here, but many agencies have financial advisors that are available on an on-call work directive basis, even for, a nominal hourly rate every year. So that's why, does that answer your question, Director McLaughlin?
It does. Virginia, do you want to expand your motion?
Yeah, I can. Yeah. So I would make a motion to hire or issue an RFP for the retention of the financial advisor, and that make this the first project that they work on.
Chuck, do you want to amend your second? Or?
Yeah, and let me say, I think that was an excellent suggestion, Stephen, because
thank you.
There could be an issue with the Series A as well, and as from my reading of it, the document for Series A was the same as the document for Series B. And so I'd hate to get into a situation where we could get the advice on Series A, but we didn't have the right to ask about it or something. So I think broadening it could be very helpful. Thank you. Also, so my second, I will approve the change in my second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any additional discussion?
And I just want to make one more comment. I do appreciate that we're looking at all of this. And I just want to say that, the financial pictures changed dramatically since I got on the board, when all of this, when our budget was much smaller. And so I'm not going to fault any of the previous boards. I mean, we're all responsible for, doing the work, but I quite frankly think that there were so many other issues. But I do appreciate, Jim, that your diligence in just kind of bringing this to our attention. But I don't want to fault any of the other board members, because our landscape financially on a macro levels changed significantly over the 9 years. So I think that we have a chance to do something now to fix the situation, especially with the Series B, since the Series A have been, called, and they were called in August. And at least let's look at that. And we've got someone on board who can advise us as the financial landscape, I think continues to change. So I think that this motion is a really good motion to make. And I appreciate Chuck seconding it.
All right. Robert?
I have a comment. I just want to get clarification on what we are really going to vote on, because the Chuck latter statement was talking about looking into Series B, which I thought it was already called, and we just only working on the Series B. Are we going to be doing both? We're going to do B and then retrospect look at A with this new, with the person we're going to bring on board. Well,
Can I clarify my comments? I think the focus is on Series B. I was just making the comment that Series A is the same document. And so we might hear about Series A as we talked about Series B.
Well, I prefer we don't even, I mean, you may hear about it, but that's going down a different lawsuit road that, you know, I don't know. At this point, I don't know. I mean, should we pursue
But if
that?
I could, I think this would give us, I think my understanding of the motion is that we are creating a resource that could be used for a variety of purposes. And the first order of business will be the Series B. And
That was my motion, yeah.
and if there was
Okay.
and if there was an interest to look at A or do some financial projections, that resource would be in place to access to get some advice on these issues. That's my understanding. All right. If there's nothing further, I'll ask Michelle to call the roll.
Director Crawley,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Solano,
Aye.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin.
Aye. All right. Thank you so much. And, you know, we'll look, I have to, a question for, again, Steve and Kathleen, I meant to ask it earlier. I see the next payment is due February 1st. I imagine that that's just not doable in the time.
Oh, we already paid it because you have to pay ahead.
We've already made that.
Yes, we made it Friday.
So the next one would be that August 1st, 2021. Okay. Am I correct that there is adequate time between now and the time that next payment is due to address these issues?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Can I just Jim, it really wouldn't matter. I mean, if we can call them, they would prorate a month or they would do whatever whenever we were ready to do something, we could do it.
Good point. Good point. Thank you. All right. That brings us to reports and requests, committee reports. I believe is finance the only committee that met?
Yeah. And I'll report. Virginia may want to add something. We did meet. All of the items that we discussed at our meeting have been on the board agenda tonight. So there's nothing further for me to report.
All right, thank you. Liaison reports. Given we just named new liaisons, I don't think that.
Could I report also? And I did, because I was involved in the planning meeting with the chief and with Jim, and I knew we had this Menlo Park meeting tentatively scheduled for the end of January. I took it upon myself to jump the gun a little bit and contact Drew Combs about that meeting, just because I felt that by the time we met and we formalized everything, it would be too late to say we weren't prepared for a meeting next week with Menlo Park. So I did contact him to say that, and I mentioned that the chief and Jim both agreed that I should go ahead and do that. But that's why I did go ahead and contact him about that meeting.
All right, thank you. All right, we can go around the table here. Reports and requests. Virginia?
Yeah, I wanted to address the situation, this tragic accident that happened a quarter of a mile from my house in an area that's in my neighborhood. And that's that accident that's been publicized in the newspapers recently and that Harold emailed the board about. This is the accident where tragically 3 teenagers were in an incident where the car flipped over, and it sounds like one of the teenagers passed away. That was written about this evening. So I've heard from different people in my neighborhood about this incident, and they wanted to know what we can do. And I believe, and Harold, correct me if I'm wrong, this is happened within the jurisdiction within the city of Menlo Park. I was walking that hill today, which I do about 3 or 4 times a week. And I just, noticed that there's, very little speed limit signs. If I didn't even see one actually, as I was walking up that hill, literally past the accident site. I know that a lot of people speed down the hill. It's not just teenagers, but even just normal adult drivers. So I guess, Harold, my question is, what can we do to ensure that there's public safety? I mean, and I'm not saying we should do this, although I'm not sure it's such a bad idea. Is this something where we want to put a speed bump with a cutout in it, like we have at the duck pond near on Monte Rosa, so that people aren't speeding through this residential area? And actually, this area is in some ways worse because there are pedestrians, and at 1 p.m. on a Saturday that was gorgeous. It was probably like 70 degrees outside. I'm sure there were people walking around because people are trying to get out of their homes, right? So what can we do? And the community is asking me this as well. At least 3 or 4 or 5 people have contacted me because these are my neighbors about this. And does it make sense to work with the city to do speed bumps or any other traffic mitigation? Well, I don't know if I guess it's traffic mitigation or speed, limit the speed of this, besides, adding speed limit signs, which again, I didn't see up and down the entire street from the top near Hallmark down to Alto. But I do think that if we can help further the discussion on safety so that there are no more accidents, or at least, limit the number of accidents. I think there have been 2 in the past, 20 years, or at least one. I don't know when it was was it the one when the Range Rover rolled over? I can't remember.
I don't
when.
remember. I don't remember that one.
Okay, well, in any case, it is dangerous. I mean, people have been speeding up and down that hill, and it's not just teenagers.
Yeah, here's what I would say. I mean, this is one of those ones. It's, to have what I would call strategic patience.
Yeah.
People are grieving. This whole thing isn't done. The investigation's still ongoing. I just was reading some of the comments in the almanac, because of what was said about the drug testing, which is absolutely normal in these cases, as at least 2 of the directors know, because they were in law enforcement. That's just how you do it. So that's not saying that anybody was drinking, but, again, emotions are running high. These are people everybody knows in the community. So, I think just letting the investigation kind of describe what really occurred versus jumping to conclusions is step one. I would not be in favor of any kind of speed bump, hump, or lump on a downhill like that. You're just going to ask for people to have even a bigger problem navigating a steeper slope like that. And, should the community decide or the city decide to do something, I would only say one thing from our perspective is, if you're going to do anything, make it a one-way so the fire engines can still get through there and get to the top of the hill without having to navigate around. I've heard even already people proposing to close the street down. I don't think
that stretch, you mean?
Yeah, I heard
Oh
that.
my gosh, that would be disastrous.
Well, right, but I think again, emotions are running high. 2 accidents in 20 years is better than many of the streets that we have in the district. So,
yeah,
again, I think we just give it some time. Don't overreact. I know people are looking for different things right away, but I think we just got to be patient. Let the investigation come out and get to exactly what happened before we kind of say or do anything. And I would say, even from the standpoint of the families, there's more going on. I don't want to share what it is on this during this meeting, but this is going to be, and I already knew from the get-go, this is going to be a very difficult call. We're looking, just so you know, to do debriefing with the crews. I think that's the right thing to do. That's everybody that responded. I mean, they're affected by these things too. I don't want to over dramatize that because it's not about us, but we have our job to do still as well, which is to ensure, kind of the longevity of our personnel is always to deal with tragic incidents and mental health, and, letting people talk about in an after action format what they did and so forth. I will say this to you, if you read the release, I try to be very careful, very sensitive to these types of calls and not get out of my lane, so to speak. But if you look at the times that were given, maybe not all of them made it in the newspaper, but 2-minute response time for engine 4 couldn't have been any better, right? I mean, was in quarters. We decided to co-locate that unit in the house, not move it, which was also, I think, an option at one time. So that was a good, makes me feel good about that move, as difficult as it is to work out of a house sometimes. But equally, the response time by the truck and the battalion chief, the extrication, the time it took to get into the car, package the patients. And if you look at the photo, you'll see staged at the bottom of the hill 3 transport ambulances, of which every one of those, even though they had paramedics on them, we provided a paramedic to go to the hospital. So there was a continuity of care from the minute we arrived to, the minute that ambulance went to the hospital with the patient. So, good team effort. Woodside Fire Protection District was there with their transport. AMR, obviously, with their 2 transports. Engine 3 responded in addition to engine 4, truck 1, battalion 1. We actually offered up our drones. We did the aerial photography for the police department, assisted them using those resources, which I know was helpful. And, again, I want to give credit to law enforcement too. They were there very quickly. The Sheriff's Department, Menlo Park Police Department, and the California Highway Patrol, all assisted in this incident. So, equally everybody's, been affected. And AMR, when the captain called for an MCI, multi-casualty incident, that immediately gets 3 ambulances and a supervisor en route from AMR. And that also activates a call into the hospital. And these days, that's important because you just don't know what the status is going to be. So good news was closest trauma center, Stanford, which always does a phenomenal job, world-class facility. And the good news was they could accept 3 trauma patients. And so they knew what was coming. And, I'm sure everybody did everything that they could do from what I hear. The call went as good as it can go from, I think, my perspective. Doesn't make it any easier, but I mean, at the end of the day, our paramedics and firefighters did everything that they could do. And you should feel good and proud of that, because I do. We wish we could change outcomes, but sometimes you just can't. So, but it wasn't for lack of trying, right?
Right.
Lack of trying.
So Harold, in your chief's report, you said that you met with the city manager and discussed the following issues. So if this issue of how we deal with, or it's within their jurisdiction, how they want to deal with anything that will make this safer or whatever, right? I'm not sure what they're going to deal with and what they're going to bring up. I want to make sure that they're on notice that we want to be part of the discussion, because literally down the hill, which is probably 0.01 miles from where that was, is unincorporated.
Right.
And so those are the neighbors who have reached out to me. And I do think that the unincorporated areas and the fire district, given that we cover both areas, need to be involved with any discussion that any of the city council members or the city manager want to engage in. So I mean, seriously, Harold, because they do not, the residents, they probably trust right now the fire district more than they trust the city, especially the people who don't live in the city. So if you can just kind of keep abreast of what is being discussed about that, so that we're included in the discussions, that would be helpful to the residents over here.
Yeah, sure. I'll handle it with, with the PD, the chief, and then certainly the manager, who I, communicate with frequently, as you can see by the email or the
yeah.
But you also have Director Bernstein on the line. So I mean,
yeah, I know, Chuck. So I'm letting you know that too, because you're the liaison.
And I just want to say publicly again on behalf of the board, our thoughts and hearts go out to the families and victims involved. It was a terrible.
Yeah, I agree. And then Harold, just to make sure that that the crew members who were there have the necessary support that they need emotionally and psychologically, because as you know, is very traumatic. The whole thing I mean, I've been by this thing twice already, walking, you know, during my almost daily walks, and it's very, very
I was
tragic.
there, and there was kids there crying and at the site with
Yeah.
the flowers and so forth. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, look, but like I said, I think it's, you know, we can do a few things. I think we just got to be strategic and patient. There's others that are in the lead. You know, I think emotions are high. And so
Yeah.
I would, you know, I would suggest that, you know, we be careful what we do and say. You know,
I just don't want to be left out of the conversation, Harold.
I don't think we will be left out of conversation.
Well, I mean, yeah. So I know Chuck will make sure we're not left out as a fire district.
You know,
Since
Virginia,
we cover both. Anyway, I
no,
think I'm
thank you
done. I'm
for
going to
bringing-
get off my
no,
soapbox
thank you
now,
for
Jim.
bringing that. I know it's in your neighborhood, so it hits close to home. And
Yeah, it is. And I heard from people literally from 3 different communities, the incorporated, unincorporated, and the city where the deceased victim was from.
Right, Portola Valley.
Yeah.
Robert, anything to report?
Nothing. Thank you.
All right.
Not for me. I don't have anything, Jim.
All right. Hey,
Yeah,
President.
Jim, I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have a request. I learned from Manny's report tonight that apparently, and the chief mentioned it as well, that we have a new vendor for kind of data collection. And I'm not sure quite how this works in terms of where the data is coming from. But one of the top priorities for the board last year on our priority list was to examine response times. And I'd like to make a request, though if Chief, if you were already going to do it, then we don't need to vote on it or anything. But I wanted to make a request that the board get an update on the way we're collecting data, what we're finding out about response times and so forth. Can you tell me if you have any plans to bring it to us, or if
Yeah, and it's actually part of accreditation. So, you know, what Manny spoke to, and I'm sorry you didn't know, but I guess we just basically, we changed vendors is probably the better way to put it. We were in basically an agreement that all the chiefs in the county originally had agreed to. And then over time, some of them migrated to different systems. We stuck with the one that we had. Obviously, we have an IT group. Many do not. So we were able to use the former vendor, I think, more effectively than they were. So it started out as a collaborative issue with the county fire agencies, which, you know, was supposed to reduce the cost. And I'm not sure if all of that truly played out. And, you know, some were happy with the vendor, some were not. I think we were happy for a long time, and, you know, but, you know, when the county changed, vendors, or not vendors, when they upgraded the CAD and opened up the new center, you know, we started to look around to see what would be a better fit with accreditation, with data collection. And so Manny came across the vendor that we selected, and we essentially replaced the previous vendor that was the vendor that all the agencies were using in the county at one point with a new one. So to your point, you know, we have new analytics. Those analytics are based upon a new, more robust CAD. And, you know, there's a whole bunch going on, including we're supposed to start to go to closest unit through GPS. So there's a whole effort in the county right now to do that, which again will change our entire data set when that happens, because currently it's still done in an old format, which is, you know, using a response card. It's not using status from an actual unit's location. So that will be implemented, because it could not be implemented under the old computer-aided dispatch system. And now it's going to be implemented. But, you know, for what you're asking, that is the plan. And that's part of accreditation, is to present you with data. And if you looked at my chief's report at the end, equally next month is John Johnson of Fire Prevention presenting, you know, where we are with state mandated inspection. So that's, you know, we want to try and do something exactly like that with the data sets as well, because response times, you know, are important. If it's the bread and butter really of what we discuss and you need under accreditation to be updated on that. So, we're lining everything up, not only to maintain what we need for accreditation, but also equally, again, part of what we need to start doing is including you, the board members, in some of those discussions. And, that's been the natural progression based upon the goal of putting the right people in the right place to get what we needed.
Well, let me say the discussion regarding accreditation is Robert's motion was to find out what still needs to be done and then find out how long it's going to take to get that done. That's not necessarily kind of focusing on the response time issue or using the new system as a kind of a preface or introduction.
Right.
Again, I'd like to get an update on that, a little bit more extensive. I'm not looking.
You will. So part of what's in accreditation is.
What about next month is what I'm asking.
I don't know if we're going to be ready for that, but I could find out from Chief Navarro. It's like I said, even the annual reports, now that we got better data analytics and the way to get the information, it allows us to move on because, you saw it before too, when you had contradictory information or not as good and it just wasn't, there were anomalies, and how do you account for all that? And I'm not going to say that's still not going to be there until we get AVL, Advanced Vehicle Location. But this vendor should be able to do a better job just through more modern technology that we've started putting in all our units and with the CAD specifically to give us, better information. Because last time we were, as you know, using 3 different ways to find out what our actual response times were. So, there was always conflict in that.
Okay, then I think I would like to make a motion, and I'm not looking for a complete report or everything done. I would just like to make a motion that we have a status report in February on the status of response time data.
Can you make a motion on something that's not on the agenda, Steve?
Well, this is the time we're supposed to be doing that. We're directors.
No, reports and requests, right?
That's where, but the request is where we make the request and it's voted on about whether we want to put it on the agenda.
Oh, I thought you wanted.
Yeah, so that's a different conversation right there.
Yeah. Sorry, Chuck, I misunderstood you. I thought you wanted us to vote on something now.
No. I want to put it on the agenda. So
okay.
I'm simply making a motion, and look, I'm not even looking for more than perhaps 10 minutes or something, just an update on where we are. This is all news to me. I think it probably is to the other board members also. I'd like to find out what the status is on response time and being able to calculate it and when we might expect credible reports on that.
Chuck, could I suggest, I have an interest in this area as well. I think it was our highest vote getter last year in terms of area of interest. You and I will be meeting with the chief at our agenda setting meeting, and perhaps we'll just put it on the agenda during that meeting.
And I should probably have a better answer for you. Again, we just transitioned over. So I can, again, Manny's taking the lead on this project. And I think from our standpoint, what we were looking at was to get the most accurate information for the annual reports so we could complete those. And that's where we've been working is you will have data coming out for 2019, 2020 in the annual report. Both a full and a 1-page is in progress right now because of the new data sets and the better way to collect information.
I know, like Chuck, I'm interested in, we just signed a contract with this data analytics firm.
Right.
What did we task them to do? What can we expect to get? How will that improve things? So
right.
Chuck, if that's acceptable to you, we can do that during the agenda setting meeting.
Well, okay. So Jim, let me withdraw my motion. Since you have the authority to put an item on the agenda, I will withdraw my motion. I just wanted to make sure that we get an update and have some idea of what's happening.
Yeah, I share your interest, and when we meet with the chief that first week next month, we can make sure that.
Okay. Thank you. That was my only request.
All right. All right. All I have to offer is the the workshop to focus on the board priorities. I will focus on doing that after the strategic planning committee meets with Chief Navarro, and again, just to make sure that we're in sync with his efforts, and then we'll have that meeting. I'll ask Michelle to get something, get a query out to all of you to find a date that works. So that's all I have. Michelle, do we have any other public comment?
We do not.
All right. Well, I want to again welcome Francine to the district. We look forward to working with you. Again, to Kathleen, thank you to you and your folks that do all the things that you do that made the PUN groups work easier. And again, I know their work reflects your good work. So again, thank you for that. So can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second, Chuck.
All right, Michelle?
Yes. Give me 1 second. Director Crawley,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Solano,
Aye.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
and Director McLaughlin.
Aye. Okay, good night, folks.
Thank you.
Night.
Night all.
Good work, Jim, on the first meeting.
Thanks.
Good job, Jim.
Thank you.
Jim, you look nice.